Gile spent 3 years in middle school getting beaten up and humiliated by bullies, earning him the nickname King Pushover. Starting high school, all he wanted was to stay invisible and never get hurt again. But when he grabbed a dusty kendo mask to scare off a bully cornering his classmate, he had no idea what he was getting himself into. Trapped inside that mask was Hanung, the greatest kendo player Korea ever produced, dead for 18 years and waiting for exactly the right person to pick him up. However, before any of this, inside a school restroom, a group of bullies cruelly surround a helpless student and humiliate him by forcing him to stand there without clothes while shoving a toy into his mouth. They threaten him, saying that if he does not spit out what is in his mouth, they will stab him 10 times before giving his uniform back. One of the boys then begins poking him with a wooden stick, coldly commenting that his ability to endure the pain is surprisingly strong. After that, a member of the kendo team steps forward and says he wants to stab him too, but another bully quickly warns that if he actually does that, it could be considered attempted murder. Ignoring the warning, the kendo player grabs the wooden stick and tells the victim that after this final hit, everything between them will be finished, adding that he almost feels sad about having messed around with him for the past 3 years. He then swings the stick hard and strikes the boy in the chest with great force, causing the toy in the victim's mouth to fly out along with saliva that splashes onto the kendo player. Seeing this, the kendo player becomes enraged and declares that he had originally planned to end things lightly since it was the day before graduation, but now, in his anger, he threatens to go much further. The kendo player then continues to hit the young boy repeatedly that scores the other boy watching, and he wonders if they are going to get reported on the school violence. The other guy then starts laughing and says that if he got beaten and stabbed that much, the school violence committee would have already been convened, and the young boy is not called King Pushover for no reason. However, the young boy then starts tearing up, thinking that he need to endure this for today and then he will never have to face them again in his life. Later that night, the young boy takes a shower at his home and tries to remove the graffiti that those bullies drew all over him, and he continues to cry. 1 month later, the young boy takes admission in high school where everyone gets along with each other so quickly. A boy named Gene Seo walks over to the quiet student known for being a pushover, whose name is Gile. Gile quickly explains that he used to attend Guanyu Middle School, but Gene Seo casually asks if there is a famous taekbaki place near that school that tastes really good. Gile answers that the shop has already closed down and has been replaced by a cafe. At that moment, a tough-looking student in the classroom complains loudly that they have been talking non-stop since morning and are not letting him sleep. Hearing this, Gile chooses to stay silent, thinking it would be safer not to get involved. However, the rude student suddenly walks up angrily and demands to know why he is not responding. Gile immediately becomes frightened and starts worrying that if he gets labeled as a pushover right at the beginning of the semester, his school life will be ruined. Just then, the bully grabs Gene Seo by the collar and angrily asks why he is ignoring him, and only at that moment does Gile finally understand that the bully had not been speaking to him in the first place. After that, the bully grabs Seo and drags him along, making it clear that he is planning to teach him a lesson, but Gile just stands there and makes the decision to keep still and not get involved, because deep down he knows that there is really nothing he can do about it anyway. He tells himself that as long as he is not the one on the receiving end of it, he is fine and that is good enough for him. The bullies then take Seo to the back of the classroom and start tormenting him right there, and watching it all unfold starts pulling Gile back to his own days in middle school when he used to be on the receiving end of that exact same kind of treatment, with nobody around who would step in and do anything to help him. After school wraps up, a coach comes up to Gile and asks him to take a bag of balls over to the sports equipment room, and when he makes his way into the empty room to drop everything off, he comes across a kendo mask just sitting there. Right at that moment, the bully shows up and shoves Seo into the same room, so Gile panics and quickly tucks himself away out of sight. The bully then starts going after Seo and tormenting him because he had failed to bring money for him, and just as things escalate and he pulls out a stapler and goes for Seo's head with it, Seo suddenly tells him to stop, standing there with the kendo mask pulled over his face. The bully gets mad and starts walking towards Gile, but then, he notices that Seo's condition doesn't look good. At that moment, Gile hits the bully with the head bump and runs away from the room, and he continues to run as fast as he can in the street, wondering what he could do right now. Meanwhile, at Kendo Academy, the social studies teacher tells the students that due to school circumstances, it's difficult to bring a new coach and he has decided to take charge for the time being. One of the students then asks the teacher if he could come by the spring tournament, so the teacher tells him that he will try and for now, he should continue training as they have been doing. However, the third-year player says that the spring tournament is right around the corner and they are telling them to train without a coach. One of the second years says that at this rate, they are suggesting that they would abolish the Kendo club. Hearing that, the third year gets furious at him and asks him if he is actually serious. Another third year named Dongguk says that they all knew the Kendo club support was declining and Coach Ha suddenly leaving for another school too. The Kendo club's captain named Jaesok asks if there is anyone who would quit Kendo just because there's no coach, but everyone gets surprised to hear that. Jaesok further says that he is going to talk to the school again and for now, they should focus on preparing for the spring tournament. Another guy then asks Jaesok that even if they ignore the coach issue they need to fill the lacking members first to participate in the tournament. Gile enters the Kendo club and so does the bully who manages to find him. The bully then tries to take off his mask but Jaesok appears out of nowhere and grabs his hand. Jaesok then says that not just anyone could enter the Kendo club like that. Jaesok then tells Gile that there is a back door inside the Kendo hall, so he can go out through there. After that, Gile runs through the Kendo hall, apologizing to the other Kendo players for causing a disturbance and leaves the place using back door. Gile then tells the bully that if he lurk around the Kendo hall one more time, it won't end with just his wrist but he will teach him a good lesson. Later that evening, Gile sits at the nearby ground and wonders what if he get caught and he begins to think about all kinds of speculations and things that could happen to him. He then starts hearing a noise, so he looks around but turns out it's coming from the Kendo mask. Suddenly, a blue light appears out of the mask and someone says that they thought they would die due to suffocating. Meanwhile, the members of the Kendo club are still arguing over not having enough members in their club. One of the members of the Kendo club says that training without a coach is twice as hard and Jaesok says that for the time being, it would be good if they took turns checking the overall training. He then asks whether any new students have decided to join the club, but the other member explains that although they posted recruitment notices, not a single person has contacted them. A second-year student brings up the person who ran away earlier while wearing a mask, but a third year immediately becomes angry and firmly says they will not accept anyone into the club without properly knowing who that person is. At the same time, the mask speaks to Gile and explains that it has been 18 long years since he last met someone who could actually hear his voice and respond to him. The mask then reveals that he was once human as well and asks Gile to carefully set him upright. After Gile properly stands him up, the mask proudly declares that he was the greatest Kendo player Korea has ever produced and introduces himself by the name Hanson. He then explains that he needs to borrow Gile's body, since Gile is the only one who listened to and acknowledged his voice, and finally he invites Gile to rise together with him and become the Kendo King, leaving Gile completely shocked by the bold proposal. The mask continues by explaining that Gile does not naturally have the ideal physical build or conditions for Kendo, but if he truly possesses the same courage he showed earlier in the storage room, then succeeding is not completely impossible. Gile responds by saying that what happened back then was not real courage at all, but simply a reckless mistake that occurred in the heat of the moment when he lost control and acted without thinking, and he insists that he does not have any true bravery inside him. However, the mask calmly tells him that the reason does not matter, because the important fact is that he still chose to take action, which is something impressive on its own, and he adds that if Gile allows him to borrow his body, then he will share his strength in return, ensuring that Gile will never run away from any opponent he faces in life again. Gile firmly refuses and explains that he barely managed to escape from being treated like a pushover, and he does not want to draw attention to himself or stand out for no reason, since he only wishes to live quietly as an ordinary and unnoticed person. In response, the mask questions him, asking how long he truly believes he can continue running away like that, and reminds him that his parents did not bring him into this world just so he could live his entire life in fear like a coward. Hearing that, Gile gets emotional and shouts at him, asking what he knows about it as he never experienced it himself and then he shouldn't speak about it. Elsewhere, the Kendo club members are enjoying theater food at a restaurant talking about the same topic of finding a coach. One of them wonders why the Kendo club support is in this state when the world championship winner is the chairman of the board. At the same time, Gile is taking the mask with him to his house, wondering what he is going to do with it. The mask then opens up and apologizes to Gile for bringing up his parents the way he did, explaining that he can see clearly where Gile's life is heading and that the frustration of watching him getting beaten up over and over again was eating at him. Gile then opens up and tells him that just the sight of a bamboo sword is enough to bring all kinds of bad memories flooding right back to him without any warning. He then quickly sets the mask down to the side and pulls up his shirt to show him the scars he has been carrying around since middle school, telling him that those marks are from 3 straight years of getting stabbed and beaten with bamboo swords by a group of delinquents who happen to be in the Kendo club. The mask guy then tells Gile that he is not going to push him any further or ask him to go deeper into what happened back then, but that there is one thing he knows for absolutely certain, and that is the fact that the very people who stepped in and saved him today were also from the Kendo club. That night, Gile cannot get any proper sleep and just lies there turning over everything the mask said to him earlier, unable to quiet his thoughts down enough to rest. The next morning, Gile gets to school as early as he possibly can and makes his way straight to the storage room to drop the mask back off where he found it. Gile then sets the mask down to the side and quietly apologizes to it for not being able to step in and help, but right at that moment he notices two of the bullies making their way into the room and looking around trying to track him down. One of them thinks out loud that if the person from earlier was wearing something that looked like a Kendo helmet, then that means they have to be from the Kendo club, but the other one shoots back and says that even the Kendo club members looked like they were genuinely seeing the whole thing for the first time themselves, which makes him doubt it. The other guy then brings up the fact that pretty much everyone in the school already knows that even most third years do not go around messing with the Kendo club, and that it is just something that is widely understood. Hearing that, the other bully completely loses it and snaps, saying that without their sticks those Kendo kids are absolutely nothing, and then he starts taking out his frustration by kicking everything around the room and sending stuff flying in every direction. The things in the room then start toppling over and falling in the direction of where Gile is crouched down hiding somewhere behind all of it. The other guy then tells him to go look for the cigarettes, but he replies that someone named Park Sung must have hidden them somewhere else. Meanwhile, one of the members of the Kendo club is on her way to school with her dad in a luxury car. The girl then says that she has a favor to ask, but the dad thinks that this is unusual that she is actually asking him for a favor. He then asks the girl about the favor, so the girl straight away tells him to hire a new coach for their team. However, the girl's dad replies that the coach position still hasn't been decided and the spring tournament is starting soon, so the coach position can't remain vacant. He then reassures the girl and explains that she should not worry so much, since her father is the chairman of the board and will definitely take care of that single problem for her without any difficulty. The girl expresses her gratitude, but her father responds that she does not need to thank him in such a formal way and says he wishes she would treat him more comfortably instead of speaking so stiffly to him every time, as if he were not simply her dad. A short while later, the girl tells the driver that she will get off there, and then she suddenly pauses. Her father gently suggests that she should ride in the car today because it is still early and hardly anyone will notice, yet she calmly answers that getting off here feels much more comfortable for her. While on his way, the girl's father makes a call to the principal to discuss the matter of hiring a coach for the Kendo club, but during the conversation he firmly states that there will be no new coach hired and that the Kendo club will be shut down as originally planned. At the same time, Gile makes a strong effort to avoid going anywhere near the storage room again and runs away from that area as quickly as he possibly can. All of a sudden, Gile picks up on some noise coming from the direction of the Kendo club, and when he looks over he can see that the members inside are going at it and training with an incredible amount of intensity, and he also notices that the senior in there is the very same person who stepped in and saved him the day before. Gile then realizes that it is still barely even dawn outside, and yet every single one of them is already in there pushing themselves that hard, and something about watching all of it pulls him in and he finds himself completely fascinated and obsessed with how cool the whole thing looks. Gile then makes his way to his classroom where everyone is already settled in and caught up in their own business, and Gile thinks to himself that he has not missed a single day of school up until now, and starts wondering whether Seo actually got seriously hurt from everything that went down. The bully from before is sitting across the room surrounded by his group of thugs, and they are all talking amongst themselves about some other guy who apparently stepped out to go smoke somewhere. Without any warning, the bully suddenly hurls a slipper straight at Gile's head and tells him to run down to the store and pick up some bread for them. He also points out that Seo skipped school today, and since Gile is his friend, he might as well go ahead and cover for him and buy their stuff instead. After that, Gile takes off running to go get the bread like he was told, and while he is gone one of the other bullies reaches over trying to grab at his shoes, and in doing so he notices just how completely worn out and beat up Gile's backpack actually is. On the other hand, Gile is internally freaking out and thinks to himself that if he had known this was going to happen, he really should have paid closer attention to whatever it was that Seo usually buys so he would know what to get. His mind then starts drifting back to all the times he got bullied throughout middle school, and he genuinely cannot believe that he is about to go through the exact same kind of thing all over again. He tries his hardest to shake those thoughts out of his head and focus on moving quickly to get whatever it is he needs to buy before the bully gets set off and things escalate even further. Elsewhere in the school, the principal sits down with the teacher and tells him that the Kendo Club friendly match has already been sorted out and decided, so he needs to make sure he passes that information along to the kids clearly so that everyone is on the same page. The teacher looks noticeably uneasy and nervous about the whole thing as he listens. However, when Gile finally rushes back to the classroom to take care of everything, he finds that the bullies are nowhere to be found, and he starts looking around trying to figure out where they went, but then his phone buzzes and he looks down to find a text message from someone telling him to make his way up to the rooftop right away. At the same time, the Kendo club members are eating their lunch and the third year is having their lunch like a maniac as if he hasn't eaten for days. The third year then gets furious at the second year, asking if he thinks that this strength just comes naturally to overcome opponents with a heavy sword. Just then, both the Kendo club members notices Gile running at the street with a lot of food, and the third year tells the second year that even a bean-sized kid like that buys that much food, so he should eat even more too. However, the second year thinks that this is not what is happening, as anyone can see he's being a bread shuttle and he is not buying it to eat all by himself. After that, Gile runs straight up to the rooftop, where he sees 4 bullies sitting together as if they have been waiting for him the entire time. Without wasting a second, he quickly hands over the items they demanded and explains that the store had been crowded with too many people, which caused the delay, but while speaking, he suddenly notices his own bag placed off to the side. One of the bullies then points at the bag and explains that the day before, a certain boy who caused him serious trouble had been carrying a bag that looked exactly the same, so he directly asks Gile whether he is that same person. Gile immediately denies it, saying that he is not the guy they are talking about and that he has absolutely nothing to do with whatever happened. The bully then coldly orders Gile to put the bag on if he does not want to get beaten badly, so the frightened boy slowly lifts it onto his shoulders and stands there trembling with fear. The bully then walks around Gile and looks him over from every possible angle, and no matter how hard he looks, he just cannot shake the feeling that this is not the same person he is thinking of. Gile then quietly asks him if he can just go ahead and head home now, but the bully ignores that completely and instead reaches over and places the helmet right over Gile's face, telling him that he is definitely the same guy who was running away yesterday and that his acting skills are absolutely incredible. Another one of the bullies then pipes up and says that he had been out smoking in the storage room before lunch and stumbled across the helmet just sitting up on one of the shelves in there. The bully then gets right in Gile's face and tells him to go ahead and call him a bastard just like he did the day before, because this time around he is going to make him pay for it and tear his mouth apart for saying it. Meanwhile, over in one of the classrooms, the Kendo club captain is sitting there deep in thought, running through the numbers and realizing that even if Duhan manages to come back, they are still going to be 2 players short for the team competition, and going into a match like that is going to put them at a really serious disadvantage right from the start. As it turns out, high school Kendo team competitions require 7 members of the same gender to field a full team, but if a team happens to come up short on members, they are still allowed to compete as long as they have at least a majority or more of the required number. Just then, a girl walks into the classroom and tells the captain that the history teacher is looking for him and that he needs to come down to the faculty office right away. After that, the captain makes his way over to the office where the teacher sits him down and fills him in on the details of the upcoming friendly match, letting him know that their opponent is going to be Songnam High School. Meanwhile, up on the rooftop, the bullies are still going at Gile and beating him up pretty badly, telling him that if he wanted to go ahead and play the hero, he really should have stopped and thought about what was going to come after that before making that decision. The bully then shifts to a whole new low and starts running his mouth about Gile's mother, saying that his mom should be the one apologizing to everyone for bringing such a weak and cowardly son like him into the world. The rest of the bullies keep the beating going without letting up while the others stand around recording the whole thing on their phones, hyping each other up and saying that he is absolutely getting destroyed out there. The bully then reaches into his pocket and pulls out a marker and starts drawing graffiti all over Gile's face, telling him that from this point forward he belongs to him and that he is nothing but his pet. Afterward, the bullies corner Gile and tell him to get down and bark like a dog, and when Gile refuses to go along with it, one of them just starts slapping him over and over again without letting up. Feeling like there is absolutely nothing else he can do in that moment, Gile gives in and gets down and starts barking right there in front of them, which sends the bullies into a fit of laughter. The other bully pulls out his phone and starts recording the whole thing, telling Gile that he should go ahead and wags his tail while he is at it too. The bully then demands that Gile bark even louder than he already is, and so Gile does exactly that, and in the same breath he starts apologizing to him as well, telling him that he was wrong and begging him to forgive him for it. The bullies then decide that it is time to wrap things up and head out, talking to each other that if they skip class one more time their homeroom teacher already said he was going to go ahead and call their homes about it. Before walking off they tell Gile to show up at the storage room after class, making it very clear that he already knows exactly what is going to happen to him if he decides to run. Just as the bullies are about to leave, they joke about going to grab something to eat since they burned through all their energy, but right before they get the chance to walk away, Gile's eyes land on the helmet sitting there, and the words start coming back to him about how if he lends his body then he is going to lend him his strength in return and he will never have to run away again. With that, Gile reaches down and puts the mask back on and calls the bullies out before they can take another step. The bully then quickly grabs the stick and asks him if he is going crazy from getting beaten up and planning to mess around again wearing a Kendo mask. The bully then moves forward to attack Gile, but he just grabs the guy with one bare hand and tells the bully that the helmet is called a Hyan and not a Kendo mask. Hearing that, the bully gets even more furious and tries to attack him, but Gile just moves away from the place, saying he has never once in his life drawn his sword against a weak person, but he made a promise to someone. The bully then continues to attack him, but he tries to dodge the attack as much as he can, but then, he grabs a small stick and tries to dodge the stick using that. He also tells the bully that the strike should be minimal units lasting less than a second, and then he manages to hit the bully's hand with that small stick. Gile then tells the bully that if the sword top rises, then it will cut the torso, and if the sword top lowers, then it will cut the neck. The bully then manages to attack Gile using the stick, but Gile dodges it and breaks the stick using his leg and almost hits the bully's neck. Seeing that, the bully gets scared and wonders if this is the same loser from before, but Gile tells him that if he touches him one more time then it won't end with just a warning. Deep down, Gile finds it completely unbelievable that he actually managed to frighten the bully himself, and he begins to seriously wonder whether what just happened could have been some kind of out-of-body experience where he was not fully in control of his own actions. After that, the bullies finally see their opportunity and take off running away from the scene as fast as their legs can possibly carry them, while Gile thinks to himself that he has finally returned back to his normal self because his body suddenly feels incredibly heavy again, as though the strange burst of energy and confidence that had taken over him moments before has completely drained away. Right at that moment, a guy from the Kendo club comes walking over toward Gile and immediately recognizes him as the same person who had shown up at the Kendo hall just the previous day, and he goes ahead and asks Gile directly whether he actually practices Kendo himself. The guy then warns Gile that he should do his best to avoid causing trouble whenever he possibly can, because if things go wrong he could very easily find himself ending his entire athletic career before it even has a chance to truly get started, all without ever being able to make proper use of the valuable and impressive skills he clearly possesses. He also brings up the specific chopstick move that Gile pulled off earlier during the confrontation and asks him curiously how he managed to do something like that, saying that despite having spent a very long time in Kendo himself he has genuinely never come across or witnessed anything quite like it before. However, Gile simply turns around and runs away from the scene entirely, still unable to fully process or come to terms with the fact that he actually just beat up a bully with his own hands. Afterward, Gile gets to a washroom to wash his face and he can't believe that he has such kind of power that he managed to defeat the bully. Just then, the mask tells him not to misunderstand anything because what happened earlier was him helping him. The mask further says that he already rejected his proposal and now that he has come to his sense, he should take him back to the storage room. After that, Gile takes the mask back to the storage room to place the mask, and while placing the mask, he notices that there is a crack on it and thinks that it was fine until yesterday. However, the mask gets furious and tells him that it is none of his concern, so he should leave immediately. After thanking him, he leaves the storage room quietly even though he don't want to. On the other hand, the same Kendo player from earlier thinks that they need to recruit kids like Gile as new members, but then he notices that the other Kendo members are arguing with each other. The captain then informs the entire team that if they lose against Songnam High then they are going to be disbanded. One of the third year then gets furious and starts yelling that the principal support other sports club like crazy, even sending them to training camps, but they treat the Kendo club like trash as if they can't wait to get rid of. The captain explains that sports clubs at the school have always received different levels of support depending on how well they perform, but the third-year student is not willing to accept that and gets completely furious, saying that he is going to go track down either the principal or the chairman and confront them about it directly. The captain then brings up School Rule Article 17, which states that all sports clubs at Wangrim High School are entitled to their own autonomy and independence. He also points out that according to that same rule, if a club continues to perform poorly even after receiving support from the school, or if the club ends up damaging the school's reputation in any way, then disbandment becomes something that can be seriously considered under the existing rules. The Kendo club girl then speaks up and says that they are more than capable of winning and reminds everyone that he himself had said it was a 5-person team competition, which means that she would be able to step in and participate as well. She also says that if this is a decision that cannot be taken back no matter what, then the only thing left to do is go out there and win so that disbandment never even becomes a real possibility, and that instead of standing around whining like a child about the situation, it would be a whole lot more productive to just go and put in one more practice swing. After that, the other Kendo player from earlier walks over to the more studious member of the group and asks him straight up whether he has any match videos or analysis data on Songnam High, explaining that they need to start figuring out which players are going to be stepping up for the team competition. The captain then tells everyone that their training starts now, so everyone should just get ready. On the other hand, Gile makes up his mind to go back to the mask and desperately beg him to help make him stronger than he currently is. The mask responds by explaining that the face guard came dangerously close to completely breaking apart from just that brief moment of possession earlier, and that it nearly shattered entirely the very instant he woke up, which means that the experience of possessing Gile is essentially like trying to charge a simple 1-volt battery by running a full 100 volts of electrical current straight through it. Hearing that comparison, Gile finds himself feeling genuinely confused about what the mask means by that. So the mask breaks it down further and tells him plainly that he is simply too small and too limited of a vessel to be able to contain and handle the sheer amount of power that comes with being possessed, and that if he were to go ahead and possess him even one more time in the state that Gile is currently in, the overwhelming force of it would cause both of them to completely explode and be destroyed. Gile then pushes back and tells the mask that if he would just take the time to properly teach and train him, then he is going to be more than capable of handling everything that comes with it. But the mask shoots that idea down by pointing out that his willpower is far too weak and underdeveloped, and that the habit of easily giving in and submitting to an opponent is not simply a problem that exists in the physical body alone. Gile then declares passionately that he is even willing to put his own life on the line for this opportunity, but the mask firmly tells him that he should not be saying things like that so carelessly. Despite that warning, Gile continues to press and tells the mask to please give him just one more chance to prove himself, so the mask finally responds by telling him that if he truly wants that chance then he is going to have to prove that he is genuinely strong enough to deserve it, and with that the mask presents him with a test. The mask then sends Gile off into another dimension where his challenge is to climb a mountain that is completely covered in rocks, but no matter how many times he gives it a shot, he just keeps losing his footing and ending up flat on the ground. The mask then tells him that he might as well just go ahead and quit at this point because he is nothing but a weakling who is never going to make it. Gile refuses to give up though and keeps throwing himself at the challenge over and over again, telling himself that this is absolutely nothing compared to all the beatings and rough treatment he has had to endure throughout his life. In the end, Gile somehow manages to drag himself all the way up to the top of the mountain right at the very last possible second, and the mask tells him that if he had not gotten himself up within 5 seconds, he would have gone ahead and counted it as giving up right then and there. The mask then points out that there is a cave sitting directly in front of him and tells him that he needs to push through that cave in order to reach his final destination. Gile then crouches down and starts making his way through the cave, thinking to himself that the path inside is incredibly narrow, but the mask tells him to stop making excuses about the path and explains that the real reason he is struggling is because his body is far too stiff. After pushing through, Gile eventually comes across a small camp tucked away inside, and the mask tells him that this is his own secret training ground that he put together near the summit when he was just a child, hidden completely away from everyone else. Gile realizes that no one would know there's a place like this at the mountain peak, so the mask says that he is the first human other than him to come here. The mask then asks him if he sees the tarp in the rock crevice on the right, as inside it, there should be a wooden sword with his name carved on it. He then continues to tell him that the sword he used since he started Kendo is right there and that striking post he sees over there was also made by him. Gile then asks him if he is going to learn Kendo right away, so the mask replies that he should first try splitting that tire on the striking post in half, and that's his second mission. Gile then hits the tire recklessly that gets his fingers hurt, but the mask tells him that if he hit it recklessly like that, his fingers will be crushed before the tire splits. The mask then explains that when gripping the sword, he should hold it upright with his right hand and place his left hand at the end of the handle, so the gap between his right-left hands should be about 1 fist width, and think of it as twisting both hands inward like wringing a towel. After that, Gile begins to understand that there is actually a correct way to do every task, because before this he had believed he could simply swing the hammer and get it done, but now he realizes that every action follows a proper method and technique. He keeps pushing himself forward and continues striking the tire again and again, forcing the hammer down with all his strength, while thinking seriously that this situation is no joke at all, since if he keeps pounding it any harder or any longer, the skin on his palms might truly rip open from the pressure and friction. Even so, deep in the back of his mind, he cannot ignore the uneasy feeling that something about his technique seems wrong or slightly off, yet he chooses to stay silent and not question it, because he assumes that if he dares to ask for clarification, he will probably be scolded harshly once again. On the following day, the group of bullies decides to stop targeting Gile and leaves him alone without causing any more trouble, and around that time Seo approaches him and explains that lately everything around them has been feeling unusually strange, explaining that right at the start of the semester he had basically become Suchiol's personal errand boy because Suchiol had zeroed in on him as a target, but all of a sudden he is not making him do that anymore. He also tells Gile that a few days back when he was in a really bad situation and nearly got seriously hurt because of Suchiol, some kid came out of nowhere and saved him, and ever since that happened Suchiol has completely stopped making him do any of that errand running. From that point on, Gile starts showing up every single day to practice at the mask guy's secret training spot, and after going at the tire for close to 1,000 hits he starts feeling the exhaustion really setting in. The mask guy then tells him that if he goes around tensing his whole body up just to try and swing harder, not only is he going to end up swinging all wrong, but his sword is not going to carry any real power behind it either. Later at the Kendo club, the captain gathers everyone together and pulls up last year's tournament video of Song Nam Hai, telling the whole group to pay close attention since they have no way of knowing ahead of time which opponents they are going to end up facing. The captain also makes it clear that Nam Hai is a seriously tough program and that there is not going to be a single easy opponent in the bunch, which is why starting right now they are going to be cranking up their training volume by 10 times what it currently is. By the time night rolls around, Gile is still out there grinding away at some unknown training camp, and he is so completely burnt out at this point that he feels like he cannot put any strength into his hands anymore, making it even harder than usual to get a proper grip on anything. Suddenly, the image of his middle school bully appears right in front of him, looking him dead in the eye and telling him that he is nothing but a pushover who is never going to change no matter how much time goes by. Gile absolutely loses it at that and starts hammering away at the tire with every last bit of strength he has left in him, which ends up tearing his hands up even worse than they already were. Seeing that, the mask guy calls him a fool and breaks it down for him, explaining that the entire foundation of Kendo is built on the unity of spirit, sword, and body, and that his will, his sword, and his body all need to come together and move as one single force in order to truly cut down his opponent. He goes on to explain that if Gile truly wants to cut down his opponent, he needs to let go of all that anger completely and just zero in entirely on whatever is right in front of him. Taking those words to heart, Gile shuts his eyes and makes the decision to pour all of his focus and every bit of strength he has left directly onto the target in front of him. He then pushes himself forward and goes for it, attempting to cut straight through the tire with nothing but his bare wooden sword exactly the way the mask guy had told him to, but the sheer exhaustion that has been building up catches up to him all at once and he ends up collapsing flat on the ground before he can finish. At that moment, the mask guy stands there looking down at him and thinks to himself that he had written Gile off as nothing more than a weakling and a coward when he first laid eyes on him, but after watching everything that just went down, he has to admit that he is going to give Gile credit for the kind of perseverance he is showing. A few hours later, the mask guy reaches down and tries to shake Gile awake, asking him how many more hours he is planning to just lie there and sleep, and Gile jolts back to reality and quickly comes to the realization that none of what happened was a dream and that he had actually gone ahead and split the tire that was sitting right there in front of him. However, the mask guy is quick to bring him back down to earth and tells him that it was a tire that had already been completely worn down by decades of exposure to wind and rain, so he really should not be getting all worked up and excited about it, which immediately deflates Gile and leaves him feeling pretty disappointed. The mask guy then shifts his tone and reveals to Gile that he has officially passed the test, and with that out of the way he formally asks Gile to join him on the path to becoming the Kendo King. Gile responds by saying that no matter how many times he thinks it over, he still genuinely cannot wrap his head around the idea that someone like him could actually become the Kendo King. The mask guy then tells Gile that starting from this point forward, he is going to build him up and make him strong in the same way that one would raise and train their own disciple, and that what is coming is most likely going to be even harder and more demanding than everything he has already been put through up until now. He then tells Gile that the very first step on the road to becoming the Kendo King is to go ahead and join the Kendo Club at school. The next day, Gile sits down at home and absolutely tears through his food like he has not eaten in days, and his mom looks over at him and asks him what has been going on at school lately because he has been skipping out breakfast every single morning recently. Gile looks up at her and tells her that he has found something that he actually wants to do with himself, and goes on to tell her that he wants to get into Kendo, adding that he figures there is going to be a whole lot of things to get sorted out and prepared for from here on out. Hearing him say that, his mother puts it together and realizes that this must be the reason why he has been dragging himself home so late every single night lately, but rather than being upset about it, she is actually genuinely happy because in all the time she has known him, he has never once come to her and told her that there was something he truly wanted to go after and try for himself. His mother then tells him to go ahead and do whatever makes him happy, and that if there is anything at all that he ends up needing along the way, she is going to be right there to take care of it for him. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, the female kendo player is also getting herself ready to head out to school, but her father stops her and tells her to sit down and eat some breakfast first and that he can drive her to school afterward, but she tells him that she has dawn training to get to and that she is just going to head out on her own. Hyan's father sits her down and tells her that he went ahead and looked into the whole situation with the kendo club, but that it has already been decided by the board and that the opposition coming from the parent committee is even stronger than anyone had expected, and on top of that, finding a new coach to take over is going to be a really difficult task. On the other side of things, Gile finally makes it to the kendo club after what feels like forever, but when he gets to the door he is so nervous that he cannot bring himself to just walk inside. He eventually pushes through it and pulls the door open, and right away he finds two people already deep into a kendo duel, and one of them ends up getting pushed back during the exchange. Watching that, one of the senior players observes out loud that the guy got pushed back and then got caught with a hit right on the wrist immediately after, but the other person beside him points out that the other guy had very precisely timed his move to land exactly when Hyan Sr.'s right foot was pulling back. After the sparring match wraps up, the captain glances over toward the entrance and spots Gile just standing there at the gate, so he speaks up and tells him that only kendo club members are allowed inside this space and asks him what exactly he thinks he is doing there. Gile quickly gathers himself and responds by saying that he came because he wants to join the kendo club. The other kendo guy suddenly lights up and finally puts it together, recognizing Gile as the same person from the other day, and immediately tells everyone in the room that this is the chopstick master that he had been telling them all about before. After that, everyone crowds around Gile and starts firing questions at him one after another, wanting to know which middle school he came from and how long he has been practicing kendo. Gile then tells them that this is actually his very first time doing anything related to kendo, and the captain straight up says that they do not take in beginners under any circumstances. Hyan quickly jumps in and says that there is absolutely no way that Dong Uk could have been mistaken about what he saw, so she suggests that they settle it with a sparring match as an entrance test and volunteers herself to be the one to go up against him. Dong Uk then hands Gile a proper uniform to wear for the sparring match, but then looks at him struggling to put it on and asks him how in the world he managed to develop skills like that when he cannot even figure out how to get his own uniform on by himself. After everything is sorted out, both of them make their way to the starting point and face each other, and Gile stands there wondering to himself whether he is actually going to be able to pull off a win here, but the mask quietly tells him that if he just goes out there and does exactly what he has been practicing, he is going to show everyone what he is truly capable of. The captain then tells them that the match will be decided by 1 point, and the match begins. Gile thinks that this feels completely different from the striking post that he used to practice hitting on his own, and the mask warns him to stay careful, pointing out that his single biggest opening is located in the space between the 4th and 5th lines from the top. Hyan then suddenly steps forward and launches into an attack, which catches Gile completely off guard and fills him with a surge of panic as he frantically tries to figure out what he is supposed to do in response. Gile then makes the split-second decision to try and get the first strike in by attacking her before she can follow through, but she reacts with impressive speed and effortlessly blocks his strike using her sword before immediately countering and landing a clean hit directly against Gile's torso. With that, Hyan takes the match and comes out as the clear winner, and everyone standing around watching is left taken aback by the fact that the whole thing wrapped up in less than 30 seconds from start to finish. Despite winning so convincingly, Hyan still finds herself thinking quietly that Dong Uk is not the kind of person who goes around saying things that are incorrect, which leaves her with a curiosity about Gile. However, before Gile can sit with that thought for too long, he turns to the captain and asks him to please give him just one more chance to prove himself, but the captain responds in a firm and no-nonsense tone, telling him plainly that the sparring session is completely finished and done with and that he should simply gather his things and head on back home. Despite that, Dong Uk is still curious about what is Gile's true identity because the skills Gile showed at the rooftop were truly impressive. After that, one of the nerds tells the captain that Gile seemed to have passion and he might be something he could contribute to the kendo club, but the other guy says that he was just too clumsy from the beginning. On the other hand, Gile is making his way down the hallway lost in his own thoughts, telling himself that he already knew from the very start that he was never going to be a real match for someone like that, But he still did not expect to go down quite as badly and as embarrassingly as he did. The mask then jumps in and tells Gile that all he needed to do in that moment was show everyone that he had something worth paying attention to, and that was enough. The mask goes on to say that things are actually moving in exactly the right direction, pointing out that he never once told Gile to go in there and win a kendo match, and that all he ever said was to get himself into the club. The mask guy then tells Gile something that sticks with him, saying that losing a match and giving up are two completely different things that are worlds apart from each other, and that even when he loses, as long as he refuses to give up, opportunities are always going to find their way to him eventually. But the moment he decides to give up, every single one of those opportunities disappears for good. Later during math class, Gile is still sitting there turning that thought over in his head, telling himself that if he just keeps pushing forward and refuses to stop until he gets there, the opportunity he is looking for is going to come. After class wraps up, Seo catches up to Gile in the hallway and asks him if he has some free time to go grab hamburgers together, but Gile does not hesitate for even a second and tells him straight up that he is busy and that they should save it for another time. Gile makes his way back to the Kendo club once again and gets down to it, flat out begging them to go ahead and accept him as a member. However, before saying anything else, the captain's eyes land on Gile's hands and he tells him to go ahead and hold them out so he can get a proper look, and when Gile does, the captain takes one good look at the state they are in and realizes that this kid genuinely has the kind of passion that cannot be faked. The captain then turns to the rest of the group and tells them that they can go ahead and let him in, and everyone else falls in line and agrees to it, and Hyan is just as happy about it as the rest of them are. The captain then turns back to Gile and asks him whether he would be able to jump right in and start training today, and Gile lights up and tells him that he is completely ready to go and has been ready for a while now, so the captain tells him to just go ahead and get through today's session in his gym clothes since he does not have his proper gear just yet. Watching all of this, the mask guy finds himself genuinely impressed by how far Gile has come, and thinks that the real challenge is only just beginning now, because the training is about to get a whole lot more intense and Gile is going to need to toughen up his mind if he wants to keep up with what is coming. The next day, everyone gathers together at the meeting spot, and while they are getting ready, the mask pulls Gile aside and tells him that he really needs to start paying closer attention to his knee and ankle angles, because whenever he is closing the distance between himself and his opponent he tends to shake around quite a bit and it is noticeable. Gile then asks him why keeping his posture locked in and steady is so incredibly difficult to maintain, and the mask tells him straight up that it is because his breathing keeps going unstable on him, and until he gets that under control, his posture is always going to suffer for it. After that, the rest of the Kendo club members start showing up at the spot one by one so that everyone can go and take a bath together as a group. Over at the pool, Dong UK and the others decide to turn things into a bit of a competition and start testing each other on some kind of diving skill to see who out of all of them can hold their breath and stay underwater for the longest amount of time. Just then, three of them look over and notice that both Gile and the captain are still hanging in there and holding up surprisingly well underneath the water, but then both of them end up breaking the surface and coming up at exactly the same time. Later on, everyone gets back into the dojo and gets down to training, and Gile is right there in the mix putting in the work alongside the rest of them. Junyang tells him that footwork is important in Kendo and he is going to show him the basic foot movements. He then shows Gile to first place both feet parallel and keep his heels together, and then he should make his left foot perpendicular and then his heel 90 degrees. Hyan then tells Junyang to get home some water, so Gile follows him. Junyang seriously informs Gile that if they lose the upcoming match, the school has already decided that the Kendo club will be shut down, since it has not been performing as well as the other sports teams and is seen as a burden. Hearing this heavy news, Gile feels the pressure deeply. Later that night, he returns alone to the mountain to continue his harsh training, thinking to himself that they absolutely must win the match no matter what, but the mask firmly tells him to stop worrying about the result and concentrate fully on improving his skills instead. The mask then instructs Gile to sprint toward him and grab the water bottle placed beside him. Gile pushes his tired body forward and runs with all his strength, yet he suddenly loses balance and falls hard onto the ground before reaching it. The mask calmly explains that whenever he is dragged or forced backward, he must protect his stance and posture while stepping back carefully, because the strength to retreat properly and maintain balance is just as valuable as the strength to charge forward with force. After listening closely and trying again with better control, Gile finally succeeds in reaching the bottle and completing the training properly. After that, Gile keeps going with his training, pushing himself harder than before, and he even succeeds in catching the water bottle properly, which makes the masked man think to himself that Gile has done well and that it is now time to increase the difficulty. Gile then picks up the helmet and slowly walks through the jungle, feeling so extremely exhausted that he believes he could collapse at any moment from the intense strain on his body. The masked man tells him that there is no need to force himself that much, explaining that he has already been doing high-intensity training for many hours, so feeling tired like this is completely normal and expected. He also wonders out loud whether Gile's parents become worried since he returns home late every single day, but Gile explains that although they do worry about him, his mother is actually happy because he has finally found something he truly enjoys doing. The masked man then brings up his father, and Gile calmly explains that his father passed away before he was even born. After a short pause, Gile asks how the masked man ended up trapped inside the mask in the first place, and in response, the masked man explains that he cannot clearly remember the details either, because when his memories and awareness about Kendo awakened, the only words that remained clearly in his mind were Kendo King. In addition to that, he thinks that if his guess is right, he will be able to escape from the mask when he became the Kendo King, but he also tells Gile that what's important is that he is going to make him strong until he can escape from here. The next day, Gile runs into Hyan on the street, but she just ignores him and walks straight towards the school. Gile also joins the two boys of the Kendo club, but one of them just walks away, so the other tells him that he is a bit shy. Later at class, Seo once again asks Gile if he have time today because he wants to go to a PC cafe together, but Gile replies that he has to go straight to Kendo club. Seo realizes that Gile joined the Kendo club and that's the reason he's been so busy lately, and that made him think that the person saved him that day could be Gile. On the other hand, at Songnam High School, their coach gives a friendly match lineup to the team captain named Sung, and when he checks the lineup, he asks the coach if it's okay to put in 3 first years. The coach tells him that it's true, but it's also a suddenly scheduled match and he thinks first years are enough for a school like Wangrim High. Meanwhile, the captain of Wangrim High also decides the lineup and he wonders who the captain and vice captain should be and says that if anyone has opinions about it then they should just share. Hearing that, Gile asks the nerd if they pick a new captain for matches, but the nerd replies that the captain they are talking about here isn't what he thinks and explains that in a 5-person team competition, the player who fights last is called the captain because it's the position that has to finish the match with victory. Hyan then turns to the captain and puts forward the suggestion that they should slot Ji-Yun in as vice captain and move Dong Uk up to the captain position, explaining that she thinks the steady and reliable nature of Dong Uk would actually serve them better when it comes to closing things out, compared to Ji-Yun who tends to take bigger risks and go for bolder plays. After that, the more studious member of the group decides to throw his own opinion into the mix and explains that while stable and consistent play is definitely a good thing, when you are going up against a powerhouse program like Songnam High, he actually thinks that having someone bold enough to take risks the way Ji-Yun does could end up giving them a better shot at pulling off a win. Dong Uk then speaks up as well and puts it out there that Ji-Yun should be the one taking the captain spot while he himself steps into the vice captain role instead. Once the lineup gets sorted out and everyone is on the same page, the captain tells the whole group to make sure they are taking care of their bodies and keeping their condition in check, and he pulls Junyang aside and tells him to go dig through the equipment left behind by graduated seniors and find something that is going to fit Gile properly. A little while later, Junyang comes through and tracks down a set of gear that looks like it is going to work well for Gile, and he also asks him whether he wants to swap out the mask he has been using for a different one, but Gile tells him that he is perfectly happy with the one he already has. Junyang then adds that when the new masks eventually get handed out down the line, Gile should just go ahead and toss his old one because the new ones are honestly so bad that even he himself would not bother using them. The next day, everyone arrives at the Kendo club but gets surprised to see that Gile actually cleaned it up. Junyang tells him that he is going to help him too from now on, so he should let him know in advance next time. Just then, Hyan also arrives and she gets surprised to see that everything is all cleaned up. Ji-Yun also shows up and everyone tells him that Gile completely cleaned the floor, but everyone are surprised to see that Gile actually injured one of his legs. After that, everyone gathers around him and begins asking about his condition, wanting to know exactly what happened and whether he is seriously injured. Ji-Yun explains that he only twisted it a little and claims that it is nothing major, even though the hospital staff still insisted that he should wear a cast to keep it stable. The captain then tells Ji-Yun to stop downplaying the injury and honestly explain how bad the situation really is. In response, Ji-Yun admits that the doctor said his ligament is slightly stretched, but he adds that they are not too concerned about the upcoming match because he plans to take painkillers and continue playing anyway. Hyan reaches out and tries to take his crutches from him, but he quickly pulls them back, and she explains that she only wanted to check if he could actually walk without them since she believes they should make sure it is truly a minor injury. To prove his point, Hyan suddenly throws the crutches aside and forcefully stomps his injured leg on the ground to show everyone that he is capable of walking without support, but the captain immediately stops him and firmly says that it is enough, ordering him to rest and skip practice for the day. All of a sudden, Hyan's leg flares up with a sharp and intense pain and he ends up going down to the ground, so the captain takes one look at the situation and tells him that it is better for him to sit this match out completely. Later on, the captain goes to the teacher and asks if there is any way to push the friendly match back to a later date, but the teacher tells him straight up that postponing it at this point is just not something that can be done. The teacher then brings up the idea that the newest member who just recently joined the club could step in and take part in the match, and at this point it really seems like that is the only realistic option they have left on the table. On the other side of things, Gile is sitting in one of the bathroom stalls talking quietly to the mask, pointing out that if Hyan is out then that only leaves 4 people total, but the mask comes right back and tells him that it is actually 5 people when you go ahead and count him in the mix as well. That catches Gile completely off guard and he is genuinely shocked to hear it, but the mask tells him to relax and not stress about it because he is right there with him every step of the way, and on top of that this whole situation is actually shaping up to be a really good opportunity for both of them. He also tells Gile that the more real match experience he can rack up the better it is going to be for him in the long run, and that if he just listens closely to his voice throughout the match, they are going to come out on top. Meanwhile, on the opposing side, one of the players is standing around questioning out loud whether they really need to be going all out like this against what is essentially a complete no-name school. The other guy wonders out loud whether they have really only been putting in serious practice for just a day or two, and still admits that Jae-sok is actually a pretty solid player, and one of them pipes up and says that if he ever actually trains the right way and commits to it properly, he could not only take down Gile's team but potentially cause problems for their own team as well. At that moment, their own team's captain shuts them down, scolding them for standing around wasting their time running their mouths, and tells them to go grab their bamboo swords and line up in front of him right now. He also mentions that whoever shows up last is going to be spending the entire weekend doing solo training sessions with him personally. The next day, Gile's captain sits everyone down and makes the decision to assign Gile the captain position for the upcoming match, and some of the others jump in and suggest that they should go ahead and switch up the overall order as well, but the captain shuts that down and says that the original order they had already figured out together is still the best way to go. Later that night, Gile pushes himself and continues training as hard as he possibly can while Hyan stands off to the side watching him and quietly stewing in frustration over the fact that he is not able to get out there and play himself. Finally, the day everyone has been waiting for arrives and the whole group makes their way to the venue and gathers together for the match that is about to get underway. Over at the venue, Gile's principal walks over and greets the Songnam coach, saying that if this is the same Songnam High that took home the national tournament title, then they are probably looking at a pretty overwhelming victory on their end. The match lineup then gets sorted out and announced, with Jae-sok going up against Seung from Songnam in the Vanguard match, and at the second position Junyang is set to face off against Minyu from Songnam, while the middle position match has Hyan going against Jaeyoung-soo, and in the vice-captain match Dong Uk is matched up against Sungjun. And then rounding everything out is the captain match which is going to be fought between Gile and Hyan. One of the players on the opposing team looks over the lineup and thinks to himself that it is honestly kind of funny that Gile's team went ahead and put first years into pretty much every single slot except for the vanguard and middle positions. Dong Uk thinks that they are completely looking down on them, so the other guy says that it's obvious because they are the national tournament winning team. First match is going to be of Jae-sok, so Dong Uk tells him to show them who Wang Rim's captain is and come back. The match then begins with Kendo High players cheering for their teammate who is going against Jae-sok. The match kicks off with Jae-sok coming out and going straight at his opponent with a full-on aggressive offensive strategy, throwing everything he has at him right from the start, but the opponent does his absolute best to dodge and get out of the way of each and every attack coming his way. The mask guy then leans over to Gile and tells him that what Jae-sok has going right now is a really powerful momentum, strong enough to completely overwhelm the person standing across from him. He reminds Gile that he is going to need to find that exact same kind of momentum for himself if he wants to take control of his own matches. Jae-sok's opponent stands there taking it all in and thinks to himself that just like back in middle school, the sheer sense of dominance that Jae-sok carries is absolutely incredible, and that his kendo has only gotten more solid and refined since then. However, he still believes that he has the edge when it comes to pure speed, and figures that all he really needs to do is rattle Jae-sok enough to throw off his thinking and create an opening somewhere. Watching that, the masked guy comes to the conclusion in his head that the outcome of this match is already basically decided, and he believes that the one in control right now is the one hunting the other down like a wolf, relentlessly clawing in from every possible direction until a weak point finally shows itself. However, he still holds firmly onto his belief that the opponent is the tiger, who he believes to be Jae-sok. After that, Jae-sok manages to land the very first score of the match, and the players from the other team begin to murmur amongst themselves in surprise, wondering out loud whether Jae-sok is actually that strong of a player, especially considering the fact that even Sung, who is a senior, is now being visibly pushed back and put on the defensive. The match then continues with Sung thinking to himself that he let his guard down at the wrong moment and that he became so intensely focused on pushing forward with his attacks that he ended up exposing a significant weak point in the process without even realizing it. The masked guy then thinks to himself about the importance of closing the distance between two opponents in a single instant and reflects on the idea that even if the opponent happens to be a tiger, once he gets the opportunity to bite there is no letting go. After that, both players throw themselves into a fierce and intense duel against one another and end up going in at the exact same time with their strikes. The referee takes a moment to assess what just happened before ultimately declaring Jae-sok as the winner of that exchange, and Gile's principal turns to the opposing team's coach and casually remarks that Song Nam-hae's vanguard must not be in the best condition today. The masked guy then leans toward Gile and tells him that everything that just played out in this match is going to provide him with a great number of useful hints and valuable lessons that he can carry directly into his own upcoming match. After that, it becomes Junyang's turn to step onto the match area, and he immediately notices that his opponent is using a high guard stance and appears to be about 10 centimeters taller than him, which makes the situation even more challenging. The opponent quickly advances to launch an attack, but Junyang skillfully dodges it, only to realize that the situation is still very dangerous because he cannot find an opening to counterattack, and if he retreats any farther, he will step out of bounds. He understands that receiving a penalty on top of this would put him at a serious disadvantage, so he concludes that his only real option is to close the distance and push forward boldly. However, before he can fully execute his plan, the opponent strikes him cleanly on the head, successfully winning the first round. Junyang then thinks carefully that if he rushes in recklessly again, he will likely be struck once more, yet he also knows that he cannot afford to stay passive, since a high guard stance can leave the torso exposed if handled correctly. Determined not to lose hope, he decides to aim for that opening and target the opponent's unprotected body, believing that at the very least he must secure a draw, because that is the only way to keep the Kendo club safe from being disbanded. The match then continues with both of them going after each other in a back-and-forth exchange, but at a certain moment Junyang spots an opening at his opponent's torso area and moves forward to capitalize on it with a strike, and right at that exact same moment the opponent comes in and lands a hit directly on Junyang's head instead. With that decisive exchange, the opponent comes out as the complete and undisputed winner of the match against Junyang, and now the spotlight shifts over to Hyan as it becomes her turn to step up and compete. Jae-sok turns to her before she goes in and tells her to simply do what she always does out there because he believes in her completely, and she responds by telling him that he should do exactly the same thing and trust himself just as much. On the other side of the court, Junyang's opponent turns to his teammates and explains that Junyang's patterns were far too simple and straightforward throughout the entire match, which made every single one of his attacks completely predictable and easy to read and prepare for, and one of the other guys agrees by adding that Junyang was so visibly nervous that absolutely everyone around could practically see every thought going through his head before he even acted on it. However, they also think amongst themselves that the one who really lucked out in terms of favorable matchups is Jae-soo, since he ended up getting paired against a girl. The match then gets underway with Jae-soo thinking to himself that his strategy is going to be to come out aggressively right from the start and completely crush her spirit and confidence before she can settle in, but the very moment he tries to make his move forward, Hyan calmly and efficiently blocks his attack and shoves him straight back without any difficulty whatsoever. After that, Hyan goes straight for his head and wins the round that leaves Jae surprised as he was going to go easy on her because she's a girl. Seeing that, Gile also gets surprised and realizes that this is what controlling time really means as Hyan really went in immediately without any preparation. The match then continues with the opposing player charging straight toward Hyan and throwing a wide variety of different attacks at her one after another, but Hyan keeps responding with sharp and precise thrusting movements that catch absolutely everyone watching completely off guard, leaving them all wondering amongst themselves whether what she is doing is actually grounds for a disqualification. Junyang also finds himself growing increasingly frustrated as he wonders out loud what the referee is even doing standing there and whether they should just go ahead and file a formal protest about the whole situation. The mask guy thinks to himself that even though this is not an official tournament setting, what is happening out there is still not proper etiquette by any reasonable standard, and while there are no formal penalties that can be handed out for it, the referee steps in anyway and brings the match to a stop. Seo then turns to the injured player standing nearby and asks him whether it is something that normally happens for men and women to compete directly against each other like this, and the guy responds by explaining that under normal circumstances it would not happen at all, but that because this particular event is a friendly match and there are some special circumstances surrounding the situation surrounding it, an exception was made and the organizers went ahead and allowed it to take place. Despite the unusual nature of the pairing, Seo then follows up by asking whether their school is the one that is at a disadvantage in this matchup, and the guy reveals that the team actually sitting at the disadvantage in this situation is none other than Songnam High. He goes on to explain that Hyan happens to be the only female player on their entire team, which has left her with absolutely no choice but to regularly spar against the male players on the squad. He also thinks to himself that while the opponent clearly has the upper hand when it comes to raw physical strength and speed, he is severely lacking in actual experience and real competitive exposure, and on top of that he finds himself going up against an exceptionally gifted female player who more than makes up for any physical differences through a level of skill and technique that surpasses both speed and strength on their own. Hyan then proceeds to deliver a truly breathtaking performance on the floor, moving with remarkable precision as she manages to dodge every single attack that comes her way before stepping in and landing a clean and decisive strike directly against her opponent's torso. However, the mask guy watches the move closely and thinks to himself that the torso strike looks strangely familiar from somewhere he cannot quite place, and with that exchange settled, Hyan ends up walking away with the win for her match. After that, it is Dong Yukei's turn to step up and get into his duel, and no matter how hard and how many different ways his opponent comes at him, Dong Yukei just keeps reading every single move and slipping right out of the way, and eventually the two of them lock into a tight back and forth sword exchange right in the middle of the court. Dong Yukei starts to realize during all of this that even though he absolutely needs to be putting points on the board, he is holding himself back and not going after his opponent as aggressively as the situation is calling for. He further thinks that with all the different techniques his opponent keeps throwing at him, finding the right moment to commit to a bold attack is proving to be genuinely difficult. Dong Yukei keeps his focus though and eventually spots a sweet spot opening up, and he capitalizes on it immediately and brings his sword down clean on top of the opponent's head in a strike that looks clear and decisive to everyone watching. However, the referee then makes a call that raises a lot of eyebrows and refuses to count it as a point, which immediately gets people suspicious. Watching that unfold from the sideline, the more studious member of the group thinks to himself that it was absolutely a point because the sword went all the way through without any question, and that something is clearly not right about the way this match is being officiated. On the other side, Dong Yukei starts to lose his focus because of the way the referee keeps making questionable calls, and his opponent picks up on that distraction right away and sees the perfect opening, lunging forward and going straight for Dong Yukei's head, but Dong Yukei reads it just in time and slips right out of the way before it can connect. Despite the fact that the strike clearly did not land, the referee goes ahead and counts it as a head point anyway, which leaves Dong Yukei standing there completely stunned and unable to believe what he just heard. The more studious member of the group on the sideline completely loses it as well, but Jae-seok quickly steps in and tells him to keep it together and not let the emotions take over, because if they all start getting worked up and reactive on the sideline, Dong Yukei is not going to be able to block it out and stay locked in on what he needs to do. Dong Yukei stands there and thinks to himself that the distance was clearly too short on that strike and there was absolutely no real power behind it whatsoever, but at this point he knows that he has no other option left but to throw everything he has got into the remainder of the match and go completely all in. After that, Dong Yukei does exactly that and throws everything he has into the match and manages to land a clean strike right on the opponent's torso, but he ends up taking a hit in return at the exact same time, and with that exchange the opponent walks away with the win. The opposing team's coach stands on the sideline processing what just happened and thinks to himself that Dong Yukei's torso strike clearly went in before the match came to a close, and he simply cannot wrap his head around why it was not counted as a valid point, which leads him to start suspecting that the principal may have gone ahead and done something to influence the referee and make things swing in their favor. Now it is Gile's turn to step up and take his place on the court, and before he goes out there Dong Yukei looks over at him and tells him to go ahead and show everyone that same form he pulled off that day up on the rooftop. The opponent stands across from Gile and sizes him up, feeling pretty confident and even a little excited about being the highlight moment of the entire match, and he makes up his mind right then and there that he is going to go out there and absolutely crush Gile without showing even a single bit of mercy no matter what happens. Gile starts feeling the nerves creeping in, but the mask guy quietly tells him not to let any of it get to him and says that he should not let his heart get pulled around by thoughts of winning or losing, and that all he needs to do is go out there and put on display everything that he has been putting in all the hard work to train for. The match then gets underway with the opponent deciding in his head that he is going to mess around and toy with Gile for a little while before going ahead and wrapping things up and finishing him off. But he immediately gets caught completely off guard and thrown into a state of surprise when he looks across and sees that despite his noticeably short height, Gile is standing right there in front of him holding a high guard stance that the opponent clearly never saw coming and had absolutely no idea to expect from someone who looks the way Gile does. Seeing that, the opponent gets furious that Gile is using high guard stance and he doesn't know his place and is acting all cool. The captain then asks the nerd if he teach him all that, but he replies that it's not possible because he only recently started practicing middle guard. On the other side of things, the opponent stands there and thinks to himself that what Gile really needs is the kind of strength and courage that allows a person to stand completely exposed in front of their opponent without flinching or backing down. And from where he is standing he can practically feel Gile trembling from across the court, which tells him that kind of courage is something Gile is seriously lacking right now. After that, the opponent decides to make his move and surges forward to land a hit, but Gile digs deep and pulls together every last bit of strength he has and launches a single clean strike directly at the opponent's wrist in one sharp and decisive motion. The moment it lands, the entire room goes completely silent for a split second before everyone erupts in surprise at what they just witnessed, and just like that Gile takes the round. The opposing team's coach stands on the sideline processing what he just saw and thinks to himself that it is a technique he has not come across in a really long time, noting that Gile briefly slid his grip back along the sword to cut down the distance and increase the speed of the blade just enough to get it through before the opponent could react. One of the other team's players then turns to his teammate beside him and asks him if he really just said that Gile has no official rank at all, because on top of everything else he is out there pulling off a high guard stance and throwing around all kinds of irregular techniques that absolutely nobody saw coming from someone like him. Meanwhile, Gile is standing there thinking to himself that his very first attack landed exactly the way he needed it to, and that through all of this he is starting to genuinely understand how reach works in Kendo and how to use it to his advantage. In a flashback, Gile is deep in the middle of suffering through one of the most brutal sessions at the training camp, and the mask guy tells him straight up that he is just going to have to push through and endure it, because the reality is that he was born with a shorter body than most of the people he is going to be going up against, and the only real way to get past that disadvantage is through reach. The mask explains that depending on exactly how he grips the sword at any given moment, it can effectively become longer or shorter in his hands, and that understanding how to use that is everything. The mask then leaves him with a lesson that cuts deeper than anything else he has said, telling Gile that winning a fight is not really about going out there and finding all the weak points and disadvantages in your opponent, but rather it is about facing your own disadvantages head-on and finding a way to rise above them yourself. Back in the present, the opponent starts to wonder whether Gile is just putting on an act and pretending to be less experienced than he actually is, so he decides to throw him off by striking the ground hard, and the moment Gile loses his footing and his control slips, the opponent wastes no time and charges straight at him and lands a clean hit that sends Gile crashing down to the ground. The guy then stands over Gile and tells him that he is nothing but a clown who spent his time doing shuttle work and sucking up to everyone around him, and that he picked up Kendo thinking that maybe it would change something about himself, but that in the end it is just not going to work out because he was simply born a loser and that is never going to change. Gile completely loses it after hearing all of that, and the opponent sees the opening right away and takes full advantage of his broken composure to go ahead and rack up a point, but right at that moment the mask speaks up and asks Gile whether he is really going to let himself go down like this. Gile's mind starts playing tricks on him and he can suddenly see the image of his middle school bully floating right there in front of him in the air, laughing and mocking him, and just as that image takes hold, the opponent surges forward and launches his next attack, but Gile stands his ground and blocks the move cleanly, and in that moment something clicks back into place and he finally pulls himself together and regains his composure. After that, Gile surges forward and goes on the attack hard, and the opponent starts panicking inside, thinking to himself that none of his moves are landing and wondering why the whole flow of the match has suddenly shifted so drastically against him. Gile, on the other hand, is completely fired up and thinks to himself that when you are up against a high guard stance, the worst thing you can do is back away, and that the only way to create real opportunities is to keep pressing forward with strikes and thrusts and not let up for even a second. He then pushes his sword even further forward in a move that sends the opponent stumbling all the way down to the ground. Watching that, Hyan picks up on something that nobody else seems to notice, realizing that Gile had actually shortened his reach by pulling his grip back along the sword, and that what looked like a miss was not a miss at all because he had deliberately chosen not to hit him in that moment. The other team's players quickly call out to their teammate from the side and tell him that he has absolutely no choice but to keep pushing forward and go in no matter what it takes. Gile then turns to the guy and tells him straight up that he keeps stumbling every single time he tries to back away, and that if he keeps retreating like that he is never going to be able to throw his opponent off or take control of the match, and that real momentum has to come from the spirit behind it, and with that kind of weak and rotten spirit behind his moves, proper momentum is never going to show up for him. The match then continues again with the opponent player charging forward as he is furious about Gile lecturing earlier. Gile then manages to push the guy back and calls him out by saying that every time his shoulders tense up, his intentions become completely obvious to read, and then goes ahead and shoves him back once again to prove his point. Gile then looks at him and tells him straight up that if he is going to approach Kendo with that kind of disrespectful and arrogant attitude, then he should never pick up a sword again in his life. With that, Gile walks away with the win, and the other team is left completely stunned and unable to wrap their heads around the fact that they just lost to someone who is supposed to be a total newcomer who barely knows what he is doing. Right after that, Gile suddenly feels all the strength drain right out of his body, and at that exact moment the opponent player takes advantage of it and lands a hit on Gile that ends up cracking and breaking the front shield of his helmet clean apart. After that, everyone rushes over and pulls the other guy away from the situation and gathers around Gile to help him get back on his feet. The opposing team's coach then storms into the stadium and absolutely loses it on his player for the way he conducted himself out there. He then turns to Gile and personally apologizes on behalf of the player for what happened, before gathering his team together and telling them that they are all leaving right now. However, even with the win in hand, Gile cannot help but feel really down about the fact that his helmet ended up getting smashed up the way it did. Later at Principal's office, Principal is going frustrated over winning the match because he even bribed the referee, but then Songnam brought their freshmen even though he begged them to bring proper players. He also thinks that he heard there was a Songnam first year who recorded the match on their phone, and he requested Songnam to send them the footage. Meanwhile, Gile is at his home still thinking about how he acted like a complete clown earlier and it completely disappeared because he fell for that provocation. Gile then bows as hard as he can on the ground in front of the mask and apologizes for everything he has done, and he blames himself for everything, saying that even after getting beaten like that, he is still so weak. All of a sudden, the mask speaks up out of nowhere and tells Gile that it is really disappointing to watch him sit there and blame himself the way he is doing, and the moment he hears that voice, Gile immediately jumps to his feet and frantically asks where exactly he is right now. The mask responds and tells him that he is now living somewhere inside of him, and that he does not fully understand it himself either, but that when he came back around, this is just where he ended up. Gile then asks him straight up whether he is actually alive, and the mask guy comes back and tells him that he is already dead, which means that being alive was never really on the table for him to begin with, but hearing that is enough to make Gile's eyes well up with tears as he tells the mask that he had been convinced this whole time that he had disappeared because of something he did wrong. After that, the mask guy absolutely lays into Gile and tells him that completely losing his mental composure the way he did during the match is exactly why he had to step in and take over, and warns him that if he ever goes ahead and acts like a completely mindless person out there one more time, the training that follows is going to be a whole lot harder and more brutal than anything he has put him through so far. The next day, Hyan is sitting in the car with her father, and he glances over at her and thinks to himself that she clearly has something on her mind that she wants to bring up, because whenever she does, she always ends up pursing her lips together in that same familiar way. Hyan then goes ahead and asks him that back when he was still an active player, whether there was ever a particular player that really stuck with him, and her father tells her that there must have been someone from yesterday's match who caught her eye and got her thinking. At that exact same time, Gile is out there running at an almost unbelievable speed and comes bursting into the Kendo club, only to find that everyone else has already shown up and gotten themselves settled in before him. The more studious member of the group then looks over at Gile and asks him how he is feeling, and Gile tells him that he is completely fine, but Dong Uk jumps in and says that Gile is basically like some kind of cheat code character who would probably find a way to come right back even if he dropped dead. Later that evening, Hyan keeps her eyes locked on Gile without letting up, which makes the whole atmosphere around them really awkward, and the mask guy quietly asks Gile whether he did something wrong to her at some point. Just at that moment, Jae-sok walks into the Kendo club and everyone immediately swarms him and wants to know what the history teacher had to say about the whole club disbandment situation. Jae-sok then drops the news that the club is not going to be disbanded after all, and that is all it takes for the entire room to completely light up as everyone breaks out into celebration and starts going wild with excitement. The nerd then starts poking fun at Ji-hyun, pointing out that he was basically useless during the match since Gile was the one out there doing absolutely everything, and that comment gets right under Ji-hyun's skin and makes him genuinely mad. Jae-sok then walks over to Gile and hands him his very first proper set of gear, telling him that he did a pretty solid job out there during the tournament and that he should be proud of it. Meanwhile, on a completely different note, Hyan's father is sitting at home going through the recording of the previous day's match, wondering to himself whether this Gile is the person who has been making his daughter so curious lately, and then as he keeps watching, something catches his eye and he realizes that he actually recognizes the real person behind the mask, a man named Hanung. In a flashback, people start flooding into the Kendo tournament venue to catch the main event match between Hanung and Hui Sr., and pretty much everyone in the crowd is already convinced going in that Hanung is the one who is going to walk away with the win. However, one person in the crowd thinks differently and believes that Manhwa is actually going to pull it off this time around, pointing out that this is the last high school match of his career and that he deserves to take home at least one win, and on top of that he has been putting in several times more training than Hanung has leading up to this moment. In the end though, Hanung manages to come out on top and win the match anyway, and everyone immediately swarms around him and starts firing questions at him, pointing out that this is already his 5th championship title at the national tournament level and asking him whether he is just completely tired of winning at this point. It then comes out that the person who walked away from that match on the losing end is none other than Hyan's own father. Back in the present, Seo is absolutely buzzing with excitement sitting in the classroom after watching the footage of Gile's match, and he tells the person next to him that he genuinely thought Gile had been possessed by something out there, but the other student just looks at him completely confused and has no idea what he is even going on about. Seo then explains that Gile and the rest of the team went up against Songnam High over the weekend and actually came away with a win, and the other student's jaw practically drops when he hears that because Songnam High is a school that is widely known and respected for its Kendo program and is not the kind of team that just anybody goes out and beats on a regular basis. Seeing that, one of the bullies back in the classroom gets completely fed up and furious and takes it out by going ahead and hitting the other guy nearby just to let out his anger. Later that evening, Jae-sok gathers everyone together and tells them that they all did a really solid job and put in a ton of hard work competing over the weekend, so they should go ahead and take it easy and get some proper rest today. Hearing that, everyone lights up with excitement because it has been so long since they actually wrapped up this early, and Gile speaks up and says that he is just going to stick around for a little bit longer to finish up some cleaning before he heads out. After that, everyone else packs up and makes their way out, and before leaving Hyan turns to Gile and tells him to stop pushing himself so hard all the time because knowing how to manage his own condition is just as important as any other skill he is trying to build. After everyone is gone, Gile decides to get a bit of extra training in and asks Hanung what would happen if he ended up falling asleep during a possession, and Hanung tells him that it is really not something he needs to stress about because he is just going to snap back awake when it happens. Hanung goes on to say that what actually matters a whole lot more right now is figuring out how long the possession can actually last, rather than spending energy worrying about what happens when it temporarily cuts out. After that, Gile goes ahead and tries to run through the forward attack move one more time, and as he does he notices pretty clearly that his body feels noticeably lighter and more responsive than it did before. Gile keeps pushing through and continues training for a while longer before finally wrapping up and heading out of the Kendo club at 6 in the evening. On his way back home, Gile finds himself wondering when exactly Hanung is going to wake up again since the possession time seems to only last for about 5 minutes at a stretch. Just at that moment, Seo comes running up to him completely out of breath and tells him that he kept trying to call him over and over again but he never picked up, so Gile apologizes and tells him that his head was already somewhere else entirely and he just was not paying attention. After that, Gile and Seo decide to go find somewhere to grab a bite to eat since both of them are pretty hungry at this point, and while they are making their way there, the bully from their class spots the two of them from a nearby alley where he had been in the middle of beating up some other kid. Seo then turns to Gile and asks him whether he did the Korean performance assessment, but it turns out that Gile has absolutely no idea what he is even talking about, so Seo tells him that it is pretty obvious he would not have any notes on it since he is always knocked out sleeping whenever class is actually going on. Right at that moment, the bully comes out of nowhere and launches a kick straight at Gile that sends him flying and crashing hard down onto the ground. After that, the bully keeps going and starts kicking Gile repeatedly in the face, telling him that he is exactly the loser he always knew he was and that he only ever looks like any kind of hero when he has his kendo stick in his hands to back him up. The bully then keeps throwing punch after punch at Gile while Seo stands off to the side watching the whole thing go down like a complete mess, wondering to himself whether he should just go ahead and call the police right now. Before he can do anything about it, the bully notices and kicks the phone clean out of his hand before he gets the chance. The bully then goes ahead and smashes Seo's phone to pieces and tells both of them that neither one of them is walking away from this today. Meanwhile, the school principal sits down for a meeting with Hyan's father and asks him whether he had a chance to watch the video yet, because if he does he is going to understand exactly how Songnam Hai ended up getting beaten by a group of kids that are basically complete amateurs. He also tells him that he is going to think of another way to handle the situation and that he is prepared to take full responsibility and go through with disbanding the Kendo club once and for all, but Hyan's father looks back at him and tells him to stop going down that road and leave it alone. He also tells the school principal to go ahead and hire a coach for the team. That surprises the principal, but Hyan's dad continues that he has someone in mind and he is going to give him his contact information, so he should reach out to them. At the same time, the bully is still beating up both Gile and Seo so badly that both of their faces look even more uglier than dogs. Gile thinks that the reason he turned away from Seo was because he had no power, and the reason he couldn't fight back even while being beaten mercilessly was because he had no courage. Gile then fires off some curse words at the bully, which catches the bully completely off guard, and he turns around and asks Gile whether he is planning to try and play the hero and save Seo just like he did back in the storage room that time, and whether he is thinking about turning around and running away again like he did before. The bully then winds up and drives a kick as hard as he possibly can straight into Gile's stomach, and the force of it sends Gile crashing straight down to the ground. The bully then shifts his attention and notices that Seo is at it again and trying to report him even after everything he just put him through, and the fact that Seo still has the nerve to do that after taking that kind of beating clearly sets the bully off even more. The bully then tells Gile that if he thinks he can escape, he should go ahead and crawl his way out of there, and that if he manages to get out of sight while he is busy dealing with Seo, then he is going to let him walk away with his life. The bully then turns back to Seo and starts beating him in a way that is so brutal and horrifying that even Gile finds himself standing there scared out of his mind just watching it all happen right in front of him. Gile's mind then pulls him back to a time during training when Hansung was putting him through some baseball-related drills, and Hansung told him straight up that if he cannot find a way to push through and overcome this, then he is never going to be able to land a proper strike for the rest of his life. Hansung also told him that if that baseball coming at him were actually his opponent's sword, he would have already been dead a long time ago, and told him to stop second-guessing himself and just trust in his own judgment and ability. Back to the present, Gile pushes past his fear and reaches out and grabs hold of the bully's hand, but the bully responds immediately by driving a punch straight into Gile's face with full force, and yet Gile refuses to go down and keeps himself together and stays in it. After that, the bully throws several more punches at him one after another, but Gile keeps his head clear and dodges each one of them, and then putting his full trust in his own instincts, he drives a clean attack straight into the bully's torso. The bully becomes shocked that Gile actually succeeds in landing a hit on him, and he angrily declares that Gile should forget about going home today because he will end up losing badly at his hands. Hearing this threat, Gile forces himself to remain calm and steady, thinking carefully that this moment is completely different from what happened on the rooftop in the past, because back then he had been an easy target who did not know how to defend himself at all, but now he has trained so hard that it felt like he was risking his life. The bully then pulls his arm back and rushes straight toward Gile, throwing a strong punch at him, yet in that critical second, a flood of memories from his harsh training sessions comes racing through his mind, and he clearly remembers Hansung's guidance explaining that whenever he is pushed or forced backward, he must protect his stance by stepping back in a controlled and balanced way, since the strength to retreat properly and give up ground at the right time can be just as important and powerful as the strength to advance forward and strike. Back in the present, Gile starts moving with a completely different kind of awareness and begins dodging every single blow that comes flying his way one after another, and once he has created enough distance between himself and the bully, he makes a conscious decision to pull back in a way that keeps his right foot from crossing over his left foot and throwing off his balance. The bully is starting to breathe heavy at this point and the exhaustion is clearly catching up to him, but he grits his teeth and launches himself forward to throw another punch at Gile, and then at the very last split second he shifts his whole approach and switches it up, driving a kick straight into Gile's stomach instead of following through with the punch. The bully then climbs right on top of him and looks down at him, asking him if he really thinks he stands any chance of avoiding a beating without even having a weapon on him. The bully then starts throwing punch after punch directly into Gile's face without any sign of letting up, but Gile swings his fist out into the air in response, which just makes the bully burst out laughing, and he tells Gile that he really should have just turned around and run as fast as he possibly could when he had the chance to do exactly that. The bully then connects with a hit so hard across Gile's face that Gile's mind starts drifting somewhere else entirely, and he thinks to himself that all he has ever wanted was to leave his weak and helpless self behind for good. In addition to that, even if he gets knocked down to the ground, he wants to be the kind of person who gets back up every single time with the mindset that he is going to endure through it no matter what, even if it kills him. The bully then leans down and tells Gile that if he wants to walk away from this in one piece, then all he has to do is get down and beg for his life right now, but Gile flat out refuses and says that the only real way to win any fight is to find a way to rise above and overcome whatever disadvantages are stacked against him. He also says that if he cannot throw proper punches because he simply does not have the experience behind him, then he is just going to go ahead and do what he actually knows how to do well. Gile then reaches out and grabs both of the bully's wrists with a grip so incredibly strong that it catches even the bully himself completely off guard and shocks him. The bully then looks down and notices all the marks and bruises covering Gile's hands, and it slowly dawns on him that what he is looking at are calluses that have built up over time from skin repeatedly breaking down and growing back tougher than before, and right as that realization is setting in, Gile drives his head forward and lands a clean headbutt straight into the bully's face. Gile then decides that he is not stopping there and keeps going with the same move over and over again, because Hanung had told him that if a strike is working then the best thing to do is just keep repeating it without overthinking it. He continues driving headbutt after headbutt into the bully without letting up until the guy finally goes completely limp and drops unconscious onto the ground, and standing there in that moment looking down at what just happened, Gile comes to a realization that hits him harder than any physical strike ever could, and that is the fact that he is not a pushover anymore and has not been for a while now. Gile just stands there and cannot wrap his head around the fact that he actually came out on top against a bully for the very first time in his entire life, after spending all those years getting hit, begging for mercy, being scared out of his mind, and turning away and running from every single situation like that ever came his way. He then starts wondering to himself why it took him so long to finally stand up to people like that, and makes up his mind right then and there that he is never going to let people like them walk all over him ever again, because the old pushover version of Gile is completely dead and gone as far as he is concerned. Gile then reaches down and grabs his backpack and tells Seo that they need to get out of there, and the two of them eventually make their way all the way to Gile's house together. Seo looks him over and tells him that he knows he is tough and all, but that he really still needs to go get himself checked out at a hospital just to be safe, but Gile waves it off and tells him that there is absolutely no need for that because he feels completely fine. Gile then turns to Seo and asks him to please keep everything that happened today between the two of them, explaining that he is worried that if word gets out it could end up causing problems and bringing unnecessary trouble to the Kendo club. Gile finally wraps things up and says goodbye to Seo, making sure to thank him for helping him get back home safely. Later that night, Gile is lying there feeling genuinely pumped up and excited about the fact that he actually managed to stand his ground and fight back against a bully using nothing but his own strength for the very first time, and he starts wondering to himself whether that same approach would have actually worked if the person on the other end had been Jayangtae instead. However, the moment that thought crosses his mind, an image of Jayangtae flashes through his head and he immediately comes back down to earth, telling himself that there is absolutely no comparison there because that guy is an actual trained Kendo athlete and that situation would have played out completely differently. Just at that moment, Hanung speaks up and tells Gile that hitting the striking post is actually perfect for whenever random thoughts start creeping into his head and messing with his focus, and hearing that gets Gile genuinely excited about the idea. Hanung then follows that up by saying that today's training is pretty much a wash at this point, but Gile quickly turns it around and asks him when exactly he woke up and whether he was there watching everything that went down. Hanung then asks Gile whether he actually knows what the character for the word do means in Kendo, and goes on to explain that it carries the meaning of controlling something, and that when it comes to Kendo specifically, it means that even when he is standing there with a sword in his hands, he has to truly understand how to keep that sword under his complete control at all times. He also adds that this is something that is genuinely difficult to pull off because human emotions are constantly shifting and changing from one moment to the next, and that only the people who are able to push past that and get a handle on their own emotions are the ones who can ever truly reach the level of mastering that kind of control. Hanung also makes sure to remind him that he should not go around throwing that kind of power around carelessly without thinking about what he is doing with it. However, right after saying that, he reassures Gile that looking at the whole situation from his own point of view, Gile actually did pretty well out there, and that catches Gile completely off guard and surprises him. So Hansung goes ahead and breaks it down for him by explaining that he never turned around and ran away from the situation, and that he stood his ground and held on to his will the entire time. And watching him take hit after hit like that from the sidelines was honestly one of the most frustrating things he has ever had to sit through. Hansung also brings up the fact that without that incredibly hard head of his, things could have gone a whole lot differently, and points out that pulling off a headbutt the way Gile did is not exactly something that just anyone can go ahead and do either. The following day, the rain comes down hard and heavy outside, and the bullies' friends are sitting around wondering why their guy has not shown up today, throwing around the idea that he probably stayed up all night gaming and could not drag himself out of bed in the morning. Meanwhile, a teacher from Wangrim High School makes his way to a pretty strange and out-of-the-way location and tries to get someone on the phone, but every time he calls it just goes straight to a switched-off tone. He then finds himself standing in front of a Kendo club door, so he goes ahead and pushes it open and walks inside, but the moment he steps in he stops dead in his tracks because the whole place is an absolute mess, and on top of that there is a smell of juice hanging in the air that is making the whole experience genuinely unbearable for him. The teacher stands there wondering to himself why in the world this Kendo dojo smells so overwhelmingly of juice, and then his eyes land on a guy just lying flat out on the ground like it is the most normal thing in the world. The teacher then leans down and asks him whether he is in fact Director Kong Dongcheol, and the guy looks up and asks him back whether he is really that well known, or if he just showed up here because he wants to learn Kendo. The teacher then explains that he had absolutely no luck getting through to him on the phone no matter how many times he tried, so he had no other choice but to just come down and find him in person like this, and then he hands the guy his card and introduces himself as Yoongguk, a teacher from Wangrim High School. On top of that, the teacher goes on to tell him that the chairman of Wangrim High School, Song Man-hee, is personally requesting that he come on board and take up the position of Kendo club coach, but the guy just stares back at him with a blank expression and does not seem to recognize or remember anyone going by that name at all. After a while, the coach offers him some coffee because that's the only thing he has in this Kendo club. The coach then asks the teacher why they decided to choose him, as it's been ages since he quit as an athlete and even this dojo business is not running well for him. However, the teacher replies that it's all because of the chairman's recommendation and he don't know much about that either. The coach then asks him about his salary that surprises the teacher. Later that day, the teacher informs Jae-sok that their new coach is going to join from tomorrow. The teacher also tells Jae-sok to go for his training as he must be getting late, but deep down, the teacher wonders if the situation is going to be okay because the coach is not a normal guy. After that, Jae-sok informs everyone in the club that a new coach is coming to join them very soon, but Dong-uk asks what kind of person is he, to which Jae-sok explains that he's their school's 27th graduating class and he was a player and now runs a Kendo dojo. Dong-uk thinks that he must be skilled because 27th was the time when their Kendo club was winning championships. The third year then says that all that is left is to loosen up his legs. The next day, the coach finally arrives at the office and meets with Hyan's father, and the coach says he never expected he'd be the chairman. In addition to that, the coach says that the dojo's been empty and tough on him, so he will give it his best shot. However, the chairman tells him not to do things too well and just do things as he always has. That night, Hyan decides to go out and do a running lap around the park, so someone tells her to be careful running at night because the chairman will worry. Over at the park, Hyan happens to spot Gile out there running and notices that he is completely caught up in what looks like a conversation with himself, and Gile is busy talking to Hansung and asking him whether Kendo also has anything to do with weight class, because it seems like whenever he goes up against much bigger opponents like Jae-sok, the high guard attack ends up getting blocked way faster than he expects. However, Hansung tells him straight up that it is not a weight issue at all, and explains that the real problem is that his wrist ends up getting exposed the moment the bamboo sword comes down, and on top of that the high guard was really only ever meant to be a temporary trick to get through the friendly match and was never supposed to be a long-term solution. He tells Gile that from this point forward he needs to put all of his focus and energy into mastering the middle guard instead, because it makes switching back and forth between offense and defense a whole lot smoother and more natural. Hyan then starts running along behind him and watches him with a puzzled look on her face, wondering to herself what in the world he is actually doing right now. Hansung then tells Gile that what he really needs to develop from here on out is what he calls footwork live Kendo, and he goes on to explain that because of Gile's shorter build, he needs to play Kendo by throwing himself forward with big explosive leaps, and that while it is kind of difficult to put into words properly, what it really just boils down to is that starting today he needs to run like his life genuinely depends on it. The next day, Gile runs as fast as he can toward the school, and on the way he even passes Dong Uk, who looks confused and wonders why Gile is in such a hurry. When Gile finally reaches the school gate, Hansung immediately asks him how long it took him to get there. Gile answers that it took him 25 minutes, which means he arrived 4 minutes later than the target time, but instead of praising him, Hansung calmly says that they will attach even heavier sandbags the following day, which shocks Gile. At that moment, Hyan approaches and directly questions him about what he was doing in the mountain area that is considered off-limits, since she saw him heading there the previous day. Gile explains that he was only training by himself, but Hyan firmly reminds him that students are not allowed to go up there and says it is surprising that he chose such a restricted place as his personal training ground. She then moves straight to the real issue and asks why he performed so poorly and lost in such an embarrassing way during the entrance test, pointing out that based on the level of skill he clearly possesses now, he should have been able to defend himself properly and respond with confidence without struggling at all. She also brings up the fact that it simply does not add up to her that his skills could have jumped that dramatically in such a short amount of time, but Gile thinks to himself that there is absolutely no way he can sit there and explain the whole possession situation to her without it sounding completely out of his mind. He then tells her that whenever he gets nervous his body just completely locks up and freezes on him, and that is exactly why having Hyan right there in front of him overwhelmed him the way it did. Just at that moment, Dong Uk shows up out of nowhere and looks back and forth between the two of them, asking what is going on with the weird and suspicious atmosphere hanging between them, but Hyan decides to brush past it and tells them she is going to head out first before anything else can be said. Meanwhile, the team that ended up losing to Wangrim is still out there grinding through training even though they can barely catch their breath properly after going down to a team like that, and the loss is clearly still sitting heavily on all of them. One of the players then suddenly gets up and steps out in the middle of training, saying he needs to use the washroom, and once he is inside he pulls out his phone and quietly sends a message about Gile to his middle school bully without anyone knowing. At that exact same time, that same bully is already in the middle of tormenting one of his classmates and tells him to go run out and get him some bread. Meanwhile, Gile is back out on the street running again and his mind keeps turning over what just happened, thinking that he managed to dodge the situation this time around. But he starts worrying about what is going to happen if Hyan decides to bring it up again because from the way she was acting, it really seems like she has already convinced herself that he lost on purpose. Gile then comes across Dong Uk and another boy sitting on the side of the road looking really down and defeated about something, and Jae-sok tries to lift their spirits by telling them that there are plenty of universities out there and that if they just look around hard enough, there are going to be schools that work out for them. The nerd then pulls Gile aside and fills him in, explaining that the seniors had their college counseling session today and that is pretty much the reason why everyone's mood is so low and heavy right now. The nerd then turns to the group and checks in with everyone, telling them to make sure they are keeping their grades in order on a regular basis instead of letting things pile up, and then helps take the boys inside the Kendo club. Hansung then turns to Gile and asks him whether he is actually any good at studying, but it becomes clear quickly that Gile is not really the academic type even though he might look the part from the outside. Hansung then reminds him that exam period is right around the corner and currently underway, and that hits Gile like a wake-up call as he realizes that all the time he has been pouring into training has left him with barely any time to sit down and study properly. After that, Jae-sok and the rest of the group make their way into the club and stop dead in their tracks when they find a guy sitting inside who looks like he just wandered in off the street, and it turns out that this is actually supposed to be their brand new coach. After that, everyone changes into their uniforms and Jae-sok respectfully asks the coach whether they should begin the morning practice with stretching exercises and basic swinging drills as usual. Instead of answering, the coach asks if 10 laps of normal footwork would be enough for the session, and then he casually opens a mobile game on his phone and says that he is even considering making the first part of training nothing more than simple walking. When they hear this, the team members become surprised, but the bald member asks if he should at least replace it with wrist training, and the coach replies that he can do whatever he personally prefers. Hearing this, Hansung quietly wonders to himself if this relaxed person is truly the same coach Dong Cheol he remembers from before. After that, the team carries out the training as instructed and continues pushing through it for quite some time, and once they finally finish, Dong Uk reflects that just walking around for the entire session was actually very harsh and exhausting in its own way, while the bald member is still standing off to the side tirelessly continuing his wrist exercises without any intention of stopping, which causes the more serious and studious teammate to approach him and suggest that he should also take a proper break and allow his body to rest. Dong-uk then looks over and notices that Gile has sandbags strapped onto his legs, so he turns to the nerd and double-checks with him, asking whether those are actually real sandbags that Gile is wearing. After confirming it, both the nerd and Dong-uk walk over to Gile and ask him straight up whether he is really out there wearing sandbags this whole time, and Gile tells them that he heard that wearing them is supposed to make your footwork noticeably faster over time. Jae-sok jumps in and says that his knees and hips must be absolutely screaming at him after walking around in those things for as long as he has been, but Gile just shrugs it off and tells him that he is pretty used to it by now and it does not really bother him all that much anymore. Hearing that, Dong-uk immediately spins around and tells Junyang to go grab his 4 sandbags because he is going to strap 2 onto each leg and get in on it as well, but Gile hears that and says that he is just going to go ahead and bump his up to 3 then. After that, Dong-uk and Gile starts having fun with each other while Hyan is watching that, wondering when Dong-uk got like that. Just then, the coach enters the club and asks if the training is not over yet, but Jae-sok tells him that the morning training is over, so they were taking a short break. The coach then tells them that if they are done then they should dismiss themselves, and everyone thinks that there is something off about the coach. Hansung then asks Gile how the new coach looks to him, so he replies that he just kind of some neighborhood uncle. The next day, Gile doesn't focus fully on the class, so Hansung tells him to focus on the class because he is just drawing some pictures on the class book. Gile then thinks that it could be because he only slept 4 hours and thinks that if he is preparing for the tournament, even sleeping feels like a waste. Later that day, the school principal does some research about the Kendo club players and his eyes land on Gile, so he thinks that there is nothing special stands out. He then goes ahead and sends an email to the chairman, letting him know that the school rule revision that he had requested has been completed and taken care of, and also informing him that they went through and checked the recognition records for the student Gile but did not come across anything particularly noteworthy in the process. The next day, Gile shows up and gets right into training at the Kendo club, and Hansung takes a moment to tell him that it would probably be best to go ahead and skip the night training sessions until midterms are completely over, adding that if Gile wants to end up playing for a better and stronger team down the line, then putting in just as much hard work into his studies as he does into his training is absolutely necessary. On the other side of things, Junyang turns to Dong-uk and asks him if it seems a little strange that they have been running through the exact same walking drills for 2 whole days in a row without any change, but Dong-uk tells him to stop talking because he is barely holding himself together as it is. Just at that moment, the captain runs into the coach, who pulls him aside and tells him straight up that if his average on the upcoming midterm comes in under 50, he is not going to be allowed to go to the match. The coach also breaks down the fact that new grade requirement rules have been put in place specifically to keep athletic students on track academically, and that if they do not hit the required scores then they are going to be banned from competing altogether. Hearing that, everyone gets stunned except for Hyan, who just thinks to herself that it sounds completely easy and nothing to stress over. After a short while, the bald member also shows up, and he immediately becomes angry about the new rule that requires them to score at least 50 points on their exams, loudly complaining that he has never managed to get more than 50 on any test in his entire life. Feeling frustrated, he drops himself onto a nearby bench and declares that he really wants something to eat first, because if he does not fill his stomach, he refuses to do any kind of work at all. Watching this scene, the studious member turns to Jae-sok and offers to help him, pointing out that it seems like he has far too much to handle by himself. Soon after, Hyan arrives and calmly states that she will stay as well, and, just like she did the previous year, she plans to personally look after Ji-yeon. Not long later, Junyang decides to head out, telling the seniors that they should continue working hard on their own without relying on him. Once they finish cleaning up the area, the group settles down together to study, and it becomes clear that Gile is having difficulty even with some very basic general knowledge questions, which leads Hansung to bluntly ask whether he truly lacks understanding to that extent or if he simply has not memorized the necessary material properly. On the other hand, Ji-yeon and Dong-uk are also memorizes a phrase that the sun observed from the northern hemisphere appears to move fastest around the winter solstice and appears to move slowest around the summer solstice. Ji-yeon then starts memorizing that loudly, so Dong-uk tells him to memorize it silently, but Ji-yeon gets furious at him and says that he is stupid, so memorizing the passages he is reading at least help him. Jae-sok then tells them to be careful, as if he read Korean passages like that, the test will be over before he finishes one problem. Later, Jae-sok tells them that they should briefly test what they have studied so far, and if someone passes in it, then he is going to send them back home. It's Gile's turn, and Jae-sok asks him what was the military retreat Usong-gai made to seize real power during Joseon's founding, but Gile struggles to find the answer, so Hansung helps him out. However, Hansung's guess was wrong and what Gile himself was thinking was actually the correct answer. Next, Jae-sok asks him what was the supreme legal code that became the standard for governance in the Joseon era. However, Gile is once again wrong, so Jae-sok just tells him to go back and memorize it properly. The following day, the students take their midterm mathematics exam, and Hansung sincerely tries to support Gile by explaining key points one last time, yet Gile ultimately decides to rely on his own instincts rather than overthinking every answer. In the days that follow, Gile continues balancing his schedule by taking practice tests and studying during any spare moments he has between training sessions with Jae-sok. After the midterms finally come to an end, the coach surprises the entire team by treating them to a pizza party, and for a short while they forget all their stress and enjoy what feels like one of the happiest moments they have shared together. Before long, the report cards are released, and around the same time the school principal calls the coach in for a serious discussion, clearly furious about the situation. The principal explains that the Kendo club operates at a financial loss every single year, with a large amount of money being invested but very little visible achievement in return, and since Kendo is not even considered a popular sport at the school, he believes the budget would be better spent supporting other students. He further advises the coach not to stubbornly hold on to a position that may not succeed in the long run and suggests that he should instead treat this role as a stepping stone toward a more promising opportunity elsewhere. Later that evening, after a long and exhausting day, the bald member finally finishes his activities, and as he steps out through the door, he unexpectedly bumps into a man whose face seems strangely familiar to him, as if it is someone he recognizes from his past. The bald member walks up to a boy named Duhan, but another student nearby assumes that he must be Duhan's friend. That student casually places his hand on Duhan's shoulder and asks whether he is coming along since everyone else is already waiting for him, yet the bald member firmly grabs the student's wrist and states that Duhan needs to go by himself. Feeling the tension, the other student backs off and leaves the area. Duhan then explains that he only came because he heard the bald member's shoulder injury had completely healed, and after saying that, he attempts to walk away, but the bald member stops him and mentions that there will be a Kendo club dinner later that evening and that Duhan should attend as well. Later that night, all the members gather together at the dinner to share a meal, and the atmosphere becomes heated when Junyang and Dongyuke angrily scold Gile for missing just one question on a Korean history test. Around that time, Gile also observes that Dongyuke still appears unusually irritated, and Junyang explains that his bad mood is largely due to the fact that he recently lost to Hyan by a single point during a match, which seriously damaged his pride. A moment later, Junyang receives a text message from Hyan saying that he is going to arrive late, so the captain decides that they should begin the meeting on their own instead of waiting. Junyang then starts the discussion by sharing all the background information he carefully researched about the coach, explaining in detail that after graduating from Inji University, the coach played for Wangrim City Hall's corporate team for some time before eventually retiring from professional competition. He continues by saying that after retirement, the coach opened his own Kendo dojo in Inju, but as the number of students slowly decreased and financial problems continued to build up over the years, he eventually lost even the deposit on the building, and now the dojo is basically completely bankrupt. Dongyuke then jumps in and says that they really need to get to the bottom of why the training has been feeling so half-hearted, pointing out that they have already been stuck doing nothing but basic footwork drills for weeks on end without any real progression. Junyang then adds even more to the pile by saying that he went through and put together a collection of reviews from Kendo-related online cafes and blogs, and that the coach has already earned himself the reputation of being the #1 place to avoid across pretty much every single one of those platforms. He also pulls up some match footage of the coach and shows it to everyone, and looking at the way he moves it becomes pretty clear that he is overly cautious whenever it comes to going on the attack. Dongyuke wonders out loud whether he just has a really hard time reading and calculating the distance properly, because at the end of the day someone has to be willing to commit and go in first if they want to score, but Junyang says that when he puts everything together and looks at the full picture, he is starting to think that the coach simply has no real intention of approaching any of this seriously. However, Jae-sok steps in and says that it is way too early to be jumping to any conclusions about the coach, pointing out that he played for a corporate team and that he probably has a whole different set of thoughts and ideas about how things should be done, and even Gile finds himself thinking that Jae-sok makes a pretty fair point about the whole thing. Dongyuke then jumps in and explains that there is really no point in spending all their time doing footwork training because this is not Taekwondo, and that they would be much better off getting together among themselves and focusing on actual technique training instead. Just at that moment, Hyan walks in and immediately asks everyone if they all went ahead and started the meeting without waiting for him to show up. Junyang and the rest of the group light up when they see him and are genuinely happy to find out that Hyan has fully healed up and is back to normal, but then Hyan drops some even bigger news and reveals that he brought Duhan along with him, which sends the whole room into an excited buzz. Gile then walks over and introduces himself to Duhan, but Duhan looks right back at him and makes it clear straight away that he is not the type to just roll over and hand his spot in the club to anyone without a fight. On the other side, the coach accidentally knocks a photo case off and it drops to the ground, and when he reaches down and picks it back up he freezes when he sees that inside is a picture of Hanung and himself standing together. In a flashback, when Hanung passed away, the coach actually cried hard on his memorial and some people talks about how man he isn't coming. They also talk about how he wouldn't want to hear he won the World Kendo Championship by default because Hanung ended up like this. In addition to that, one of them says that there is rumors about some pills Oswell that on the day of the accident, man he was on some pills and not in his right mind. Hearing that, the coach gets furious and yells at his senior, telling him not to say anything when he don't know anything. Back in present, Gile is going out and he thinks that they were finally done with footwork training, but now Hanung wants him to do core training. Hanung tells him that core breathing is essential concentration training that he must go through to reach the state of selfishness and explains that when his core is engaged through core breathing, he asks him what happens to the hand holding the bamboo sword, so Gile replies that less force goes into it. Hanung explains that when his core is engaged, conversely his wrist relaxes and when the sword becomes smoother, attacking becomes much easier. Hearing that, Gile realizes why the coach's sword was much smoother in the match videos and decides to go home to watch the videos again. Gile then finds some bullies talking sitting on the side of the road, so he just turns around and thinks that he shouldn't make trouble by running into them needlessly, but then Gile hears the name of Duhan. He then looks behind to see one of the bullies yelling at Duhan for not picking up his phone. Meanwhile, Hyan is sitting across from her dad at a really fancy restaurant where he has brought her to talk about some things that have clearly been on his mind. Hyan's dad then drops it on her and tells her that he wants her to quit Kendo, which hits her like a complete shock and she cannot believe what she is hearing. He then goes on to explain that she has had plenty of time to enjoy it as a hobby and that she really needs to start getting herself ready for college entrance exams before it gets too late to do anything about it, but Hyan fires back and tells him that she is perfectly capable of preparing for her entrance exams while still doing Kendo at the same time, and that she has even been keeping her grades in good shape throughout all of it. However, her dad comes back and reveals that the real reason he had been leaving her alone about it up until now was because she stopped going out of her way to look for her mom once she got into Kendo, and he tells her that she is not at an age anymore where chasing after her mom is something she should be doing. He goes even further and says that if she truly cannot bring herself to give Kendo up, then she should seriously think about going abroad to study in Japan instead, because the Kendo club she is currently in is only going to end up holding her back and getting in her way. He then starts speaking really poorly about the other members, pointing out that there is even a kid in there who got suspended for school violence, and telling her that she has spent more than enough time hanging around with kids like that. Hearing all of that, Hyan gets completely fired up and shoots to her feet, telling her father straight up that he should not be trying to turn her into someone like her mother. On the other side, Gile makes the decision to go ahead and follow Duhan, and the more he watches the situation unfold the more convinced he becomes that Duhan is heading into something genuinely dangerous. One of the bullies then gets in Duhan's face and asks him whether he really thought he could just walk away and get out from under them even after they went ahead and smashed his shoulder the way they did, but Duhan stands his ground and tells them straight up that he is done doing the kind of garbage things they are into and that he is not going back to that life anymore. Hearing that, the blonde-haired guy in the group absolutely loses it and gets right up in his face, asking him whether he wants to end up in a wheelchair this time around, and then all three of them pile on and start beating Duhan pretty badly without any hesitation. The blonde-haired guy then reaches down and picks up a wooden stick and winds up to swing it straight at Duhan, but right at that critical moment Gile comes flying in out of nowhere and throws his whole body into the guy so hard that he goes crashing and tumbling over to the other side. After that, Gile reaches down and grabs Duhan by the hand and takes off running, pulling him along and getting both of them out of there as fast as they possibly can. Afterward, the other boys goes over to the blonde one whose name is Byong and asks him if he is okay, but he just tells them to step aside and throws a rock straight at Duhan and Gile. Duhan quickly notices that and pushes Gile aside and he tells Gile that he should run at full speed from now on. The bullies then try their best to follow them, but they just runs in an insane speed that even surprises them. After a while, Gile and Duhan stops at a distance and Gile introduces himself once again, saying he is from the Kendo club who greeted him at the snack shop last time and he looked in danger, so he came to help. However, the guy then turns to Gile and tells him straight up to stay out of his business from this point forward and walks away without another word. Later on at the club, Duhan starts looking around for a stick to use, and Jae-sok tells him that he had been planning to swap out the leather grip on it and put a fresh one on in time for the comeback match, but Duhan just waves it off and says that it is perfectly fine the way it already is. After everyone wraps up training for the day, Jae-sok decides to go track down the coach and fill him in on how things are going, only to find him already deep into playing games on his phone without a care in the world. Jae-sok then tells him that everyone on the team is completely worn out from doing nothing but repeating the same basic drills over and over again, and that on top of that the match date is getting closer, so he asks the coach if they can please start moving things up to the next level. However, the coach pushes back and tells him that technique training is actually coming up next on the schedule, and then follows that up by saying that there is no technique out there that any of them actually know how to use properly anyway. He also adds that they should not even be thinking about trying to run a full course when they cannot even manage to pace themselves properly as it is, and that pushing it too hard before they are ready could leave them completely out of breath and running on empty. Hearing that, Hyan gets mad and says that basics alone have limits if they want to compete in matches, but the coach asks him if he teach him wraparound head strike or block counter torso right now, would be able to score with them. The coach then tells them not to waste time learning techniques as they can't digest and just work hard on basic training. In a flashback, Hanung tells the coach that everyone around them seems to look down on him and treat him like nothing more than a substitute, but the coach fires back and says that the seniors are not completely wrong about it because he cannot compete properly anyway, and on top of that he believes that spending time learning irregular techniques is a complete waste of time and not worth bothering with. Back in the present, Gile speaks up and brings up a phrase to the coach, saying the word "jiayak nanriang" and explaining it means that a person's true ability is genuinely difficult to measure and size up from the outside, and because of that, one should never go around making careless judgments about what someone is or is not capable of. Hearing that, everyone in the room gets completely caught off guard and starts thinking to themselves that Gile is surprisingly good at switching up his whole personality and character on the fly. The next day, the coach decides to step onto the court himself and go one-on-one with Jae-sok, laying out the rules and telling everyone that it is a simple match where the very first person to score a single point is going to walk away with the win, and that if even one of them manages to beat him, he is going to go ahead and acknowledge that ability of theirs and give them the respect they deserve for it. After that, the match gets underway with Jae-sok going straight on the offensive and pushing forward with his attack, but the coach reads it and manages to block it cleanly. And while he is doing that he thinks to himself that Jae-sok was already standing out plenty during regular training, but what he is seeing right now in an actual match setting goes well beyond what that means, and it really looks like Jae-sok has already surpassed the typical level you would expect from a high school player. The coach then moves quickly and brings his sword down clean on Jae-sok's torso and takes the point for himself. Watching that, Gile thinks to himself that what the coach is doing is deflecting Jae-sok's own power back against him rather than meeting it head-on. And even Hanung quietly observes that the coach's sword work looks exactly the same as it always has been. After that, it is Dong-Yukei's turn to step up and he ends up going down against the coach just like the others before him, and then another member of the club steps forward and takes their shot but ends up losing pretty badly as well. Next in line is the nerd, who can barely even get a proper grip on the sword to begin with, and the coach just looks at him and straight up asks him whether he actually knows how to play Kendo at all. With that out of the way, Hyan also steps up and ends up losing against him, and then it is Duhan's turn, and unlike the others he actually manages to hold his ground and put up a decent fight against the coach for a while, but then his focus slips at just the wrong moment and the coach takes full advantage of it and shoves him back and brings the wooden sword down clean over his head to finish it. The coach then looks at Duhan and tells him that out of everyone standing in that room, he knows better than anyone else exactly why he just lost. Finally, it comes down to Gile's turn, and by this point everyone on the team is standing there genuinely impressed and thinking to themselves that their coach is actually pretty incredible, while Hyan in particular is practically on the edge of her seat, desperately wanting to see with her own eyes exactly what kind of training Gile has actually been putting himself through all this time on his own. The night before, Gile had gone ahead and searched up information about his middle school bully online, and Hanung thinks to himself that this is clearly the kind of person who uses Kendo as nothing more than a tool to push other people around and make their lives miserable, and he asks Gile what he thinks the single biggest difference between himself and that guy actually is. Gile thinks about it and answers that it comes down to the difference in skill level between the two of them, but Hanung pushes back and tells him that what actually comes first is expression, and that means the composure, the confidence, and the self-belief that comes bundled along with it. He also tells Gile that even when he is genuinely scared and shaking on the inside, He needs to put on a completely fearless front on the outside and just push through whatever comes his way. On top of that, he reminds him that he has a special card in his back pocket in the form of Hansung himself, so he has every reason to carry himself with even more confidence than he would on his own. Gile then asks Hansung to teach him a technique that he could actually pull out and use specifically against Shin Jiangtae when the time comes. Back in the present, Hansung walks Gile through the mechanics of how to fake a wrist strike, and explains it by comparing it to the way an angler fish operates, saying that in order to catch fish that are faster than itself, the angler fish lures them in by dangling and waving the long antenna on its head like bait, and that in the same way Gile needs to hide his true intention completely so that the opponent takes the bait without any suspicion and walks right into his range on their own. Gile thinks that if his posture starts falling apart even a little bit, he is going to get caught immediately, and that while keeping his middle guard stance locked in and steady, he needs to open up a strike point so that the opponent feels comfortable enough to come in first. After that, the coach starts moving toward Gile exactly the way he had been hoping for, and Hansung quickly jumps in and explains that right now he needs to drop his stance, spread his feet out wider, and get his left foot planted firmly in place so that he is ready to close the gap between them at any given moment without any delay. Hansung also makes it very clear that he should not give up any ground or pull back at all until the exact right hunting moment finally shows itself, and that he needs to dig in and endure no matter how much pressure builds up right until that very last possible second. The coach then pushes forward feeling completely sure of himself, thinking to himself that this is honestly just way too easy and that Gile is practically handing it to him, but then Gile moves his arm in a way that the coach was absolutely not prepared for. And Hansung explains what just happened by saying that the opponent must have been 100% certain that his prey had walked right into his range and that the point was already his, but that turned out not to be the case at all, because what Gile just executed is a technique that takes something the opponent was completely sure about and brings it crashing all the way down to zero, and that technique is what is known as a fake wrist strike. Gile's strike lands clean on the coach's wrist, but the coach shoves him off anyway and Gile stands there completely surprised because he genuinely thought he had his prey right where he wanted him. The coach thinks to himself that if he had not caught on to the fact that it was a bait in time, he would have taken a really serious hit, and while he acknowledges to himself that the attack was actually pretty good, Gile still has a very long way to go before he is anywhere close to where he needs to be. The coach then quickly surges forward and brings his sword down on Gile's head and takes the match away from him, but even with that outcome everyone watching thinks that Gile put in a really solid effort. Junyang points out that his movements look noticeably sharper and more refined compared to how he looked during the friendly match. However, the coach thinks that because the fake wrist strike is a technique that he knows from Hansung, since Hansung once sat down and walked him through exactly how to deceive an opponent and go for the wrist using that move, and he always used to tell him that he was going to go incredibly far with that technique behind him. What the coach cannot figure out though is how in the world Gile knows about it. Later on, the coach turns to the group and asks everyone why they think not a single one of them managed to score against him today, and Jae-sok speaks up and says that it comes down to the gap in skill and experience between them. But the coach then turns to Gile specifically and asks him whether he thinks the same thing, and Gile tells him that he does. The coach then asks them for what reason do they hold the sword and asks if that's for responsibility, or because they have some talent for Kendo. He further tells them that a master he respects once said this, that Kendo is cultivated with the body and cuts with the mind. He also tells everyone that the reason they all lost to him today is because there was no heart in their swords, and at some point, they all started swinging their swords only with the desire to beat others. In addition to that, he thinks that their impatience to win took over, and even when their posture crumbled, they had to score a point somehow. The coach also explains that for all of them, going back to the fundamentals is essentially a promise they are making to themselves to never lose sight of their original intention and purpose, and that only by getting the basics completely locked down and solid can they ever reach the point where they are truly cutting with their whole heart behind it. Hearing all of that, Gile looks around and thinks to himself that the entire atmosphere in the room has completely shifted and changed from what it was before, and Hansung feels it too from his side, thinking to himself that while the fake wrist technique did not land the way it was supposed to, it seems like the real purpose behind it was achieved anyway. After the sparring session wraps up, small but noticeable changes start showing up in the Kendo club members one by one, and despite the coach having said some genuinely inspiring words that clearly moved everyone standing in that room, the coach himself remained exactly the same as he always has been without showing any change at all. But out of everyone there, Hyan ended up walking away with an almost limitless amount of trust and belief in the coach that he did not have going in. However, Duhan is still going through a really rough time these days as he continues trying to push past the trauma that his injury left behind, and as for Gile, the coach has something very specific that he wants to sit down and talk to him about, and that is the fake wrist technique that Gile pulled off during the sparring session. The coach asks him straight up where exactly he picked that technique, and Hansung immediately jumps in and whispers to Gile to just go ahead and tell him that he learned it from watching videos online. Gile then tells the coach that he just copied it after watching some footage, but the coach is not fully buying it and still thinks that somebody must have sat down and actually taught him that move, because he does not exactly come across as the kind of natural-born genius who figures these things out completely on his own. The coach then asks him whether he happens to know a person by the name of Hansung, and right at that moment the coach's eyes shift and he catches Gile's hand moving, and he just tells Gile to go ahead and leave. The next day, Gile arrives at the school, and when he enters the class he gets surprised to see that everyone is there to celebrate his birthday. The team then decides to give Gile a nice bag as a gift, and everyone seems to enjoy that. After that, they all decide to head out to eat dinner together, but then, the blonde-haired bully appears out of nowhere and takes Duhan to the side. The bully then comments that the Kendo club is tucked away in such a hidden and out-of-the-way corner of the school that it actually took him a while to track it down. Hyan and Gile look at him and suddenly recognize him from the hospital. The bully then turns his attention to Duhan and tells him that they have an unfinished conversation that they never got around to wrapping up, so Duhan turns to the rest of the group and casually tells them that he just remembered he has a prior commitment he forgot about and tells everyone to go on ahead without him. However, Gile is not about to just let that go and decides to follow them anyway, and to his surprise they end up making their way to the road leading to the same construction site as before, and this time around both Jae-sok and Hyan also fall in behind him and follow along. Earlier, the more studious member of the group told them that the bully was actually a pretty well-known delinquent back at their middle school, and that he was part of a gang that was so out of control that even the teachers could not do anything about them. Hyan immediately gets fired up and furious hearing that, but Dong Uk steps in and points out that if any of them get caught fighting, they are not just looking at expulsion, but the entire club could get disbanded on top of that, and to make things even more complicated, Duhan already has a record of violence on file, which means the school is absolutely not going to let something like this slide easily. Back in the present, the boys trail the delinquent and Duhan all the way to a spot where a bunch of other guys were already gathered and waiting around. The bully then starts throwing punches at Duhan over and over again without letting up, and he keeps going even harder when Duhan just looks back at him with a smile on his face, which ends up making the delinquent even more furious than he already was. The delinquent then reaches over and grabs a wooden stick and winds up to bring it down on Duhan, but right at that moment Jae-sok steps right in front of him and cuts him off before he can follow through. After that, Gile and Hyan also come charging in and show up ready to throw down with the delinquent alongside everyone else. Hyan thinks to himself that whether it is Kendo or a straight-up street fight, the first thing that absolutely has to happen is overwhelming the opponent with pure spirit, because that alone is what gives him the best possible chance of coming out on top. Gile then screams out at the bullies and tells them to come at him with absolutely everything they have got, but the bullies just look at each other and burst out laughing and start mocking him like the whole thing is a joke to them. After that, the fight breaks out and things get heated fast, and then right in the middle of it all the coach and the rest of the group show up holding their phones out in front of them as if the whole plan was to record everything and expose the delinquents for what they are doing. How long do you think it will take for Gile to fully master Hansung's teachings? Comment, Kendo King, if you'd like a part 2 of this series. Make sure to like and subscribe the channel for more sports manhwa recaps.